Chapter 1047. As soon as these words came out, the conference room suddenly exploded. How is this possible? Summon creatures can't wear equipment. Even if they can, which awaken would be so wasteful as to give a set to a summon creature? 99% of the awakened don't have this treatment. Fu Hong just smiled and didn't refute. Fu Yiping looked at Fu Hong with a complicated expression and slowly said, "Now it seems that the White Phoenix team isn't bluffing. They had indeed unified the world. Fu Hong, this time the guild didn't make a move against the super gods. Instead, they showed kindness to them. This is the right decision. So, what do you think we should do next?" Fu Hong didn't hesitate, continue to resolve the conflict with the White Phoenix team. "We are far from doing enough. We don't expect them to give us any benefits, as long as they don't take any substantial revenge on us, that's enough. Then, how should we face the rapidly rising super gods?" Fu Yiping frowned and said, "The White Phoenix team is bound to occupy our profit space." Fu Hong shook his head. "No, I visited Bai Xiaowen and understood his ambitions. This person's mind is no longer in the calm sea, or to be exact, not in the awakened circle. Grandpa's worries are unnecessary. In addition, since the rise of the White Phoenix team and the super gods is unstoppable, then don't go against the trend. The White Phoenix team will occupy the original profit space, this is true, but the rise of a super god team will also bring a lot of opportunities. Compared to the Giant Gods Guild, the atmosphere in the elite martial guild's conference room was not so normal. The secretary made a cup of lemon tea for Wu Chonglian. He knew that the boss liked it. Wu Chonglian took a sip and felt that the conference room was filled with the taste of lemon. "This is the MT that our elite martial guild gave up on? What do you think of the personnel department?" The personnel department was actually equivalent to the company's human resources department. It was responsible for signing and firing awakened members, as well as adjusting the job positions of awakened members and determining their treatment. It had always been the most powerful department in the guild. The head of the personnel department, Wu Jiren, was also Wu Chonglian's son, a standard member of the Wu family. Facing the father and president's questioning, Wu Jiren didn't panic. He was already prepared. Pushing up his glasses, Wu Jiren said, "The technical department has already identified it. Hansu's spectership was a special effect of the set, not his own ability. In other words, the White Phoenix battle team is awesome and has the ability to collect sets." Someone at the side immediately chimed in, "That's right, and the White Phoenix team is too wasteful. They're willing to give the set to Hansu, aren't they afraid that they won't be able to get it back?" Wu Chonglian took a sip of the lemon tea and felt a sour sensation in his nose. "Do you really think that Hansu's current achievements are all due to the support of the team?" The meeting room fell silent. Everyone looked at the president with the same question in their eyes. "Isn't that the case?" Wu Chonglian sighed. "Don't be blinded by jealousy. Although Hansu had the support of his equipment, his potential was also very good. Just by looking at the first wave where he was overtaken by the tower, his quick reaction and sharp combat instincts were already worthy of an excellent evaluation. If it was someone else, even if they had the same equipment, they might not be able to kill Han Xinyue and cripple her at the same time. Crippling Han Xinyue was very important. It made the Star Moon team lose the ability to overtake the tower a second time. Otherwise, the three members of the Star Moon team would still be able to overtake the tower once Hansu's defensive skill was over. The latter wouldn't be able to use a second big move. Most importantly, these decisions were made in the instant the enemy overtook the tower. Wu Chonglian sighed again. An unpolished gem was taken away by the White Phoenix team just like that. What the president said is a bit too mysterious. Hansu looks like a wooden block. He doesn't look like someone who has such combat instincts. Someone muttered softly. People can't just be judged by their appearance. Some people aren't good with words and their thinking is slow, but once they enter a battle, their body's reaction speed is far faster than their thinking speed. Hansu is this kind of person, Wu Chonglian said coldly. Alright, when they gave up on Hansu, I was also there, so there's no point in blaming them. Most importantly, the White Phoenix team has shown the strength of a unified team. Can our guild still be promoted to A-class this year? No one answered. Wu Chonglian suddenly stood up. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Drinking the lemon tea in one gulp, Wu Chonglian said hatefully, Li Beihai, that black bastard, has good luck. In this month's competition, the White Phoenix team had a total of 9 matches in the next 10 days. These 9 matches were the focus of attention. Many people were curious whether the White Phoenix team could maintain a winning streak with a 4-man lineup. The curious ones were only the media, the reporters with ordinary identities. The upper echelons of the guilds, the awakened ones who knew the meaning of a unified team, did not feel that there was any suspense in the following matches. The White Phoenix team also used practical actions to prove that the 4-man lineup could not only maintain a winning streak, but also win with a crushing momentum. Again and again, 2-0. Again and again, 0. None of the 4 members of the White Phoenix team had a record of death, even in the entertainment mode. Gradually, the media and the ordinary audience became accustomed to the strength of the White Phoenix team. They no longer exclaimed that the White Phoenix team was a dark horse, but silently acknowledged that the White Phoenix team's standard had surpassed the A-class. Perhaps only the Silver Frost team could compete with them. After all, the Silver Frost team had a winning streak all the way until now, and like the White Phoenix team, they had reserved strength in every match, obviously not going all out. The White Phoenix team was not affected by external disturbances outside of the competition. They still trained according to their own rhythm. Bai Xiaowen was also free to deal with some private business affairs, focusing on the operation of the virtual shop. Old Monster took Zhang Bo and introduced the operation of the Saber Dominates Many shop to Bai Xiaowen. The profits extracted this quarter had reached nearly 400,000 psionic energy points. This number was lower than a few months ago. The main reason was that the market for low-quality equipment was saturated, and for high-quality equipment, the Saber Dominates Many shop had no advantage. Therefore, the main revenue of the shop had gradually changed from equipment to gold, silver, and food in the spiritual world. The role of gold and silver in the spiritual world should not be underestimated. When awakened ones first entered the spiritual world, they had the corresponding gold and silver currency, which could save a lot of time, including inquiring about information from people in the spiritual world. Using money to pave the way was always the most convenient and fastest way. For awakened ones, the most precious thing was the time they could spend in the spiritual world. Bai Xiaowen had not used the gold and silver of the spiritual world much, but his situation was special and did not have the same characteristics. Therefore, under the situation where the sales of low-quality equipment were decreasing, the Saber Dominates Many shop was still steadily improving. At present, it was already an A3 level large shop. Of course, competition was inevitable everywhere. Some of the veteran A-level shops had already noticed the threat of the Saber Dominates Many shop, which had infringed on their profit space. Most of these veteran A-level shops were supported by the A-level guilds. They had already delineated their own territories for the mid to high-end market. After noticing the threat of Bai Xiaowen's shop, these shops tacitly clamped down on him from the commercial sector. In particular, they seized on the Saber Dominates Many shop's lack of supply of mid to high-quality equipment to suppress him. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen's previous exploration of the northern sand dunes had also formed a strong influence in the circle of awakened ones in the Jianhai division. Those veteran A-level guilds were unwilling to fall out with a quasi-big shot who owned a treasure space. They did not use any underhanded means to suppress the development of the super gods and shops. They only used commercial means to suppress him. Now, Bai Xiaowen had completed the achievement of unifying the space, and the White Phoenix battle team had also become a top battle team. This would definitely make the operation of the shop smoother. Chapter 1048. After the end of the competition month, the White Phoenix team welcomed a new month of rest. On this day, Bai Xiaowen was doing his routine inspection of the warehouse when he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "What's wrong?" Li Shi, who was instructing Xiao Jun, turned his head like a cricket whose antennae had been pulled. "There's an unexpected situation in the territory." Cecilia's secret signal has appeared in the warehouse. Bai Xiaowen snapped his fingers. I'll summon Cecilia and ask her about the situation. After Bai Xiaowen's summon, Cecilia appeared in front of Bai Xiaowen. Dior. Cecilia hurried forward and hugged Bai Xiaowen. She kissed him on the lips and said, "The territory, no, the Gorse Empire is out of my control." Bai Xiaowen awkwardly let go of Cecilia's firm and tight waist. "Tell me about it." Cecilia took out a letter. The letter was made of high-quality parchment paper and must have been made with incense and other craftsmanship. Not only did it not have the rank odor of the parchment, but it also gave off a quiet fragrance. Most importantly, the seal of the Gorse Empire's royal family could be seen on the wax seal of the envelope. A letter from the Gorse Empire's royal family? Bai Xiaowen took it. Cecilia hurriedly said, "It's a letter from Prince Nicholas." "No, it should be Nicholas IV. In the letter, he grants you the title of Lord of the North and gives you the right to do whatever you want in the Gorse Empire." Bai Xiaowen read the letter. There were many embellishments in the letter, and it was full of the elegant style of the royal family. However, Bai Xiaowen could still see two words in it. Urgent. The truth was just as Cecilia said. Nicholas granted Bai Xiaowen the title of Lord of the North, which meant that the entire North, including the Black Rock city that Bai Xiaowen conquered, was Bai Xiaowen's legal territory. In addition, there was also an order that was stamped with the seal of the Emperor of the Gorse Empire. The holder of this order is carrying out an important mission for the Empire. All officials loyal to the Gorse Empire must not make things difficult for him or her and provide him with all the conveniences within their power. Nicholas IV. It was originally just an ordinary note, but with the Emperor's seal and Nicholas' signature, the meaning was completely different. For example, it was roughly equivalent to the Imperial Envoy's Imperial Sword, one level higher than the Yellow Magua. The reason for Nicholas to promise such a huge benefit was simple. He was in big trouble and urgently needed the support of Bai Xiaowen, the Lord of Whitestone and the actual ruler of the Northlands. Bai Xiaowen also received an additional piece of information, which was that Nicholas had already ascended the throne. He had changed from a prince to Nicholas IV. Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the Spirit Realm's laws. You've received a special permit from Nicholas IV, the rightful leader of the royal family of the Gorse Empire. Your White Stonehill permanent fief order has been integrated with a new temporary authority. The fief has been expanded to cover the entire Northlands. B. When you use the fief order to enter the Cane Plain, you can explore the territory of the Gorse Empire at will and remove the restrictions within the territory. Special note, the above authority is temporary. If Nicholas IV loses his power, the temporary authority will automatically disappear. Note, the circumstances under which Nicholas IV loses his power include abdication, death, or the rightful leader of the royal family. Bai Xiaowen felt the White Stonehill permanent fief order emit a faint scorching light, which then faded away. Looking at the fief order again, it had become a Northland Province permanent fief order. Of course, this was only temporary. If Nicholas IV lost the power struggle, this fief order would also revert to its original state. Nicholas IV used this special permit to pull Bai Xiaowen onto his chariot, which was a wise move. However, Bai Xiaowen still had a lot of things he did not understand. He asked, "What's the situation in the Gorse Empire now?" The one opposing Nicholas IV should be his uncle. Cecilia nodded. "The Northlands are rather remote, and I don't know much about it. After the death of the old emperor, Prince Nicholas should have ascended the throne immediately, but his uncle Colomans gathered a group of conservative nobles to launch a coup and take the throne first." Bai Xiaowen shook his head. "Prince Nicholas is not a mediocre ruler. He has the rightful title and military power. It won't be easy for his uncle to seize the throne." Cecilia said, "Yes, the two sides started their first civil war in the central province. Colomans was completely defeated and fled in panic. Prince Nicholas ascended the throne with the support of his ministers and became Nicholas IV. As for the defeated royal uncle Colomans, he fled to the West Sand province. How many provinces are there in the Gorse Empire?" Li Shi felt a headache coming on. Bai Xiaowen smiled gently. the administrative division of the Gorse Empire is very simple. The central region where the capital is located is called the Central Province. It is the largest and most prosperous. Other than that, there are provinces in the north, south, east, and west, and their names are also very simple. For example, the Northlands where Whitestone Hill is located is called the Northlands Province. Bai Xiaowen's memory was outstanding. He could clearly recall what he learned in the Cane Plain after a long time. As a native of the Cane Plain, Cecilia knew better. She added, the names of the other provinces are usually related to geography. The eastern region is mostly plains, so it is called the East Plains Province. The southern region is facing the sea, with many islands, waterways, and harbors, so it is called the South Seas Province. The western region is mainly desert and wilderness, so it is called the Western Sand Province. After a pause, Cecilia said, when the old emperor was on the throne, he carried out a series of reforms, including taking back some of the old nobles' power, abolishing some inappropriate laws, and infecting new nobles. These reforms were resisted by many nobles, with nobles from all 5 provinces opposing them. The Western Sand Province is the base of the conservative nobles. Bai Xiaowen understood. Nicholas IV must have followed the old emperor's policy and continued to weaken the nobles' power. Then, Uncle Kalaman's should be a banner pushed by the conservative nobles who are unwilling to give up their power. Taking back the nobles' power? Li Shi blinked. Xiaowen should be considered a great noble in the Northlands now. From the perspective of interests, it seems that we should not be on the prince's side. Strictly speaking, not. Cecilia smiled. The former Whitestone Hill lord was indeed an old-fashioned noble. He had the power to kill and seize the people in his territory. However, Dior has been infected by Prince Nicholas and is considered a new noble promoted by him. He does not have the power to take the lives of his people at will. Is that the only difference? Li Shi scratched his braid. There are other differences. Bai Xiaowen smiled. For example, the right to first night is gone. That's good. It seems that the old emperor was very wise. Li Shi clapped his hands. Well, that's not the main point. The main point is that the old-fashioned nobles think that the royal family has violated their legal rights since ancient times, so they support Kalamans against the orthodox royal family. What is the support for both sides now? Bai Xiaowen asked Cecilia. In the Western Sand Province, more than half of the nobles in the province support Kalamans and have mobilized their private army against the royal family. Other than that, most of the nobles are in a wait-and-see mode. Chapter 1049. Other than this, Cecilia had no further understanding of the empire's situation. Furthermore, the information she provided was delayed for at least 3 to 5 days, so it might not be very accurate. This special permission granted to Bai Xiaowen, the Lord of the North, to act at his discretion, was sent to Baishur city through a special channel from the central province. It took 2 days for it to arrive. This meant that Nicholas IV had sent the emergency message 2 days ago. There's a huge gap in the information. Bai Xiaowen said with a frown. According to Cecilia, Nicholas IV's throne should be relatively stable. After all, he controls the central province, and the imperial army under him should all be supporting him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chased Kalamans out of the central province so easily. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen continued, the private armies of the nobles in the West Sand Province should be inferior to the imperial army in terms of combat power. For example, when the nobles in the north were resisting the invasion of the survivors, the private armies of the nobles in the north were at best cannon fodder. The real elites were still the first legion of the empire that Nicholas brought over. Then, for Nicholas IV to promise such a huge benefit in hopes of getting your support, it means that his current situation isn't optimistic, Xiao Jun said. She had also finished reading the contents of the letter. Even though she wasn't particularly proficient in ancient Latin, she could still feel the urgency between the lines. Yes, this means that there must be an additional force joining the Kalamans' camp. It could be the imperial army that changed sides, or a group of nobles that changed their original stance. Qiao Rui walked in and joined in the discussion. Bai Xiaowen gently tapped on the table and pondered. Neither of these possibilities is particularly high. With the prestige that Nicholas IV has accumulated in the army, coupled with the righteous title of the Orthodox royal family, the possibility of the army defecting is very small. Also, nobles have always prioritized self-preservation. Before the situation is clear, they rarely choose a side. Furthermore, Kolomon's is the weaker side. Bai Xiaowen stood up and said, in comparison, I'm more willing to believe that an external force changed the balance of power and caused Nicholas IV to lose control of the situation in the Imperium. That's why he turned to me for help. What should we do then? Li Shi asked. For us, the biggest limitation is time. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. If I can enter the Kane dimension normally, I'm confident that I'll be able to unearth at least the second main storyline quest. That way, I'll have more time to help Nicholas IV win the key battle. But now, the permanent fief order has only accumulated 4 to 5 days of stay, which is far from enough. A crucial battle shouldn't take too long, right? Li Shi said, in the Black Tide dimension, the final battle in the Lei Vein corridor took less than a day. The battle itself may not take too long to determine the outcome, but the early preparations for this crucial battle are extremely important. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, the same goes for the crucial battle in the Black Tide dimension. If we hadn't gathered the 7 divine artifacts in advance, we wouldn't have been able to take down the Great Lords so cleanly in that battle. In the Kane dimension, the early preparations, the investigation of the terrain, the selection of the battlefield, the handling of small-scale encounters, all of these require time. Unfortunately, Nicholas IV's permission could only affect Bai Xiaowen's range of activities in the Gorse Empire. It couldn't extend the time that Bai Xiaowen could stay. Even if Nicholas IV wanted Bai Xiaowen to stay in the Kane dimension, he couldn't do it. This was beyond the Emperor's power. Bai Xiaowen thought for a while and said slowly, now it seems that there's only one way. Everyone's eyes turned to look at him. Cecilia, after you return to the territory, hand over the affairs and immediately set off for the central province. Find Nicholas IV. Bai Xiaowen said, remember to select a group of elites from the White Stone Army to accompany you. You don't need too many. Try to choose experienced veterans who are at least squad leaders. They must have some experience in leading a team. Cecilia nodded in agreement. After you see Nicholas IV, explain my situation to him. The time I can stay in the Kane dimension is limited. I can only appear when the crucial battle starts and lead my companions to help him win a big battle. All the preparatory work before this crucial battle, including suggestions on strategic decisions, will be conveyed through you. I'll convey it. Yes, you can freely travel between the 2 dimensions. This is our only advantage, Bai Xiaowen said. I'll summon you at a fixed time every day. You'll bring the information collected in the central province and hand it over to me to make a judgment. Then go back and convey my suggestions to Nicholas IV. Although it's troublesome and far less effective than me going to the Kane dimension in person, it's the only way. If Bai Xiaowen went to the Kane dimension in person, he could gain insight into important information clues from many details that others could not notice. Thus, he could make timely war decisions. For example, during the siege of the vanguard of the survivors, Bai Xiaowen had seen through Prince Nicholas's plan to lure the enemy first on the battlefield. He had anticipated the defeat of the vanguard of the survivors and led the army in advance to intercept and annihilate the vanguard of the survivors in one battle. If other people helped Bai Xiaowen collect information and handed it over to Bai Xiaowen across dimensions, they would not have such flexible feedback speed. This required Bai Xiaowen to have the ability to control the strategic deployment in a general direction and make decisions in a general direction, rather than a detailed strategy of one city or one territory. It was a pity that there was no means of interdimensional communication. Things like the warning stone could only transmit a simple message of yes or no. The magic communication in the Kane dimension relied on the magic network and did not support interdimensional communication. Cecilia agreed on the time of the next summoning. It was estimated that Cecilia would arrive in the central province and meet Nicholas IV for the first time. After that, she would hurriedly travel back. Bai Xiaowen drew a rough topographic map of the Kane dimension and looked at the 5 provinces of the Gorse Empire in a daze for a while. This is a rare opportunity, Bai Xiaowen sighed. For us, the status of the Kane dimension is extremely important. Our connection with the Kane dimension is closer than any other dimension. Even the Aaron dimension, where Gloria is, can only be ranked second. If we can help Nicholas IV win this war, our territory will inevitably usher in a leap of development. It's a good opportunity to experience the feeling of being on Earth and commanding remotely, Qiao Rui said with a smile. Chapter 1050. 2 days later, in the afternoon, Bai Xiaowen summoned Cecilia at the appointed time. I led a group of elite mounted archers and rushed to the central province, the capital of the Gorse Empire. However, I didn't see Nicholas IV. Cecilia still had a trace of fatigue on her face after a long journey. She said softly, "Due to my identity, I received a very good reception. From the little official who received me, I learned about the Gorse Empire, or more accurately, the current situation of the Kane Plain. Dior, your deduction is correct. There is indeed an external force that has broken the balance of the Gorse Empire." Bai Xiaowen said, "Who is it? A remnant force? I don't know what kind of force it is. Those monsters came from underground." Cecilia said, "In the Xisha province, there is a large gold mine called Bosuvius. The greedy Duke Bosuvius dug a passage to the underground world. Drows, spider monsters, and other dark creatures all came out from underground." The underground world? Bai Xiaowen was a little shocked. There is another world under the Kane continent. It's really unimaginable. Cecilia said, "In particular, the conservative nobles of the Xisha province should have reached an agreement with these monsters. The monster army that has appeared in the Xisha province has targeted the Orthodox Imperial Army and launched an attack. Many officers who were injured and returned to the capital to recuperate swore that they saw the monsters and the nobles' rebel army in a strange situation, but nothing happened." Bai Xiaowen said, "The appearance of these monsters affected Nicholas IV's elimination of the rebel army?" He felt a little doubtful. Compared to the Imperial Army, the fighting power of the nobles' private army was about 0.5 geese. Even if there was a monster attack, the Imperial Army should be able to withstand the pressure and eliminate the rebel army. No, Nicholas IV is still in the central province. He is busy suppressing the unrest in the central province. Cecilia explained, maybe because of the appearance of the underground monsters, the nobles who were originally taking a wait-and-see attitude felt that Nicholas IV might not have a chance of winning, so they started to rebel. At this time, the nobles of the central province rebelled? Bai Xiaowen's first reaction was a little incredulous. Not all of them rebelled, but if one was wiped out, another would pop up. That's why Nicholas IV couldn't spare time to attack the West San province. Cecilia sighed. The central province is the headquarters of the Gorse Empire. Without stabilizing the foundation, Nicholas IV couldn't rashly march into the central province. The one currently commanding the front lines in the West San province is an old acquaintance of ours, Count Denton. Bai Xiaowen added, "This will give the rebels and the subterranean monsters a lot of time." Initially, there were only a few subterranean monsters passing through the newly dug tunnel. However, as time passed, more and more subterranean monsters would appear. "Dior, are you saying that the central province's nobles betrayed us for a special reason?" "It's obvious," Bai Xiaowen said as he walked around the hall. "Most of the nobles are wise enough to protect themselves, but few are willing to sacrifice themselves for others. The central province's nobles knew that if they raised the flag of rebellion, they would die. Why did they still do it? Just to buy time for the monster army and the West San rebels, they were willing to give up their families and centuries of inheritance? It's impossible. There's something fishy about this. By the way, I also brought some written information, including a detailed map of the empire. Take a look." Bai Xiaowen took the information from Cecilia and slowly flipped through it. Although the West San province and the central province share a border, most of the terrain is difficult to pass through, Bai Xiaowen said. the first suggestion is to ask Nicholas IV to set up sentries on the main roads between the two provinces to cut off the communication between the two provinces and to check the passers-by. The minimum requirement is to assign at least one strong person with the ability similar to the Eye of Truth to guard each route. The person must have the ability to see through the aura disguise. Cecilia nodded and noted it down. Bai Xiaowen raised a second finger. The second suggestion is about the nobles who raised the flag of rebellion in the central province. When the imperial army is quelling the rebellion, try to capture the heads of the nobles alive and send strong people who are proficient in mental spells to interrogate them and search their memories. After Cecilia noted down these two suggestions, she said, "How can I persuade Nicholas IV to implement these two suggestions?" Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. "The basis for my two suggestions is my judgment that the central province's rebellious nobles have been influenced by strong people from outside. This influence doesn't refer to bewitchment and negotiation in terms of words, but mental control. After all, the central province's rebellious nobles' movements are too strange. There are obvious traces of human manipulation." Cecilia understood. Therefore, setting up sentries to check the strong people who come and go is to prevent the strong people in the West San province with the ability to control minds from continuing to rush to the central province and influence the other nobles. Searching the memories of the central province's rebellious nobles is to collect evidence that they are under mental control. Bai Xiaowen said, "That's right." If he could find evidence of their minds being controlled from the memories of the nobles in the central province, Nicholas IV would be able to announce it to the world and expose the conspiracy of the nobles and monsters in the Xisha province. This would give him an advantageous position in public opinion. More importantly, there's another point. After pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaowen added in a more serious tone, "Nicholas IV can use this as an excuse to send troops into the fiefs of other nobles and establish a strategic defense alliance in the central province. No noble family head is willing to be mentally controlled by strong people from other forces and lead the family down a path of no return. This was an important step in stabilizing the ruling order of the central province. Only when the backyard was stabilized could Nicholas IV lead the army to the West San province. After I return this time, I will immediately go to Nicholas IV's camp and state your suggestions." Cecilia looked at Bai Xiaowen, admiration flashing in her eyes. Bai Xiaowen said, "There's one more thing you must be careful of." "Me?" Cecilia pointed at the tip of her nose. "That's right," Bai Xiaowen said quietly. "I feel that this time, the Kane dimension is not as simple as a war between the natives. It's very likely that our kind will appear." "Dior. You mean, there are awakened people involved in this war?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. "The invasion of the underground world should be related to the unification of the Kane dimension. I don't believe that there are no awakened people involved in this kind of major event that affects the course of history. Moreover, judging from the timeline, the speed at which the Western San province's conservative nobles reached a tacit understanding with the underground monsters is a bit too fast. Maybe the awakened ones are the middleman." "I understand. I'll be careful," Cecilia said. "You're no longer a person of the spiritual realm, so the holy water of resurrection should have no effect on you. In other words, you only have one life," Bai Xiaowen said. "When you're in danger, don't be stingy. Just use the teleportation spell to escape." "Okay." Cecilia held Bai Xiaowen's face and kissed him again. The teleportation spell exchanged from the Black Tide dimension, plus the original return scroll of the White Phoenix team, could completely meet the team's needs. Everyone, including Han Su, had one, and the extra scrolls were temporarily stored with Bai Xiaowen. Chapter 1051. After Cecilia left, Qiao Rui returned from Beijing. This time, Qiao Rui returned to Beijing mainly to visit his parents. After all, they were his daughters who had just graduated. He wanted to take advantage of the break after the competition to reunite with his family. "Sister Qiao, did anything interesting happen in Beijing?" Li Shi asked. "Yes," Qiao Rui smiled and said without rhyme or reason, "A vice president of the Awakened Association has fallen." "Huh? What's so interesting about that?" That vice president is a general of the Ouyang faction, Xiao Rui said. Bai Xiaowen heard something and asked, did someone attack the Ouyang faction? Xiao Rui nodded. It shouldn't be the Qiao faction, Bai Xiaowen guessed. Xiao Rui smiled, it was the Qingyi faction. We're just here to watch the show. Huh. I remember that the Qingyi faction and the Ouyang faction have a good relationship. The core families of the two factions grew up in the same compound. Didn't you say that the Lin family that Lin Haoyang belongs to is the Qingyi faction? Bai Xiaowen said. There are no eternal allies, only eternal interests. Qiao Rui ended the topic with an international sentence. He changed the topic. Actually, the cause of this conflict is due to the friction between the younger generation. After a pause, Qiao Rui said, 2 members of the Fang family got into a fight with Ouyang Heng at a bar. You've seen one of them before. It's Fang Qinghua. Fang Zi's cousin, Lin Haoyang's brother-in-law. Bai Xiaowen smiled, speaking of which, I know how they got into a feud. That's right. It was the fight for the permanent team creation item. Fang Qinghua always thought that Ouyang Heng played a trick on him and caused him to return empty-handed. If it wasn't for the fact that Ouyang Heng didn't get the item to create the team, the conflict would have erupted even earlier. But even so, the seeds of conflict have already been planted. Qiao Rui said slowly, Fang Qinghua is 2 years older than Ouyang Heng. As a hero, he can be considered an influential figure in Beijing. But this time, when he was fighting with Ouyang Heng, he and one of his teammates attacked one after another. 2 against 1, not only did they not gain the upper hand, they also suffered quite a bit. What are the specifics? He lost an arm, Qiao Rui said. Although the awakened ones can repair their limbs every time they enter the spiritual realm, the Fang family won't admit it. Ouyang Heng has become so powerful? Li Shi asked. He's definitely not as good as Big Brother, Lil Jun said with certainty. Bai Xiaowen chuckled. He was confident in his own growth rate. It was already very good that Ouyang Heng could catch up to his level. It was impossible for him to surpass him in other aspects. Bai Xiaowen continued to ask, how did the Ouyang family deal with the aftermath? I heard that Ouyang Heng was sent to the spiritual realm to lie low for a while, Qiao Rui said with a smile. This is what makes me the happiest. The last time I went back, I was harassed by him. Now that I'm home, I can finally have some peace. I think Ouyang Heng won't have the face to harass you in the future, Li Shi said. We're already a unified team. To be honest, even the big shots in Beijing have to give some face to Xiaowen. Ouyang Heng will think of Xiaowen when he sees you. He'll definitely feel inferior. Everyone in the White Phoenix team laughed. Then, they resumed their daily training. 2 days later, Cecilia was summoned with good news. Dior, after I went back, I successfully persuaded Nicholas IV to accept your suggestion, Cecilia said. He not only set up strict sentries and blocked the main roads between the Xisha province and the central province, but also sent Archbishop Arlo to personally interrogate the leaders of the rebellious nobles. It turns out that your judgment was correct. Are the rebellious nobles of the central province really under mind control? Bai Xiaowen confirmed. The situation is even worse. The leaders of the nobles have actually been killed. A kind of twisted monster called a shapeshifter sucked their brains dry and put on the skin of the dead nobles to start a rebellion. Cecilia's face showed a look of disgust. You can't imagine how disgusting and twisted the shapeshifters are. Just looking at their corpses makes me so disgusted that I can't eat. Well, whether it's a substitution or a mind control, it's all the same. It gave Nicholas IV a perfect excuse, Bai Xiaowen said, rubbing his chin. Cecilia nodded. That's right. Nicholas IV immediately announced to the whole country that the source of the shapeshifters was the rebel army of the Xisha province. The lords of the central province had no choice but to open up their territories and let Nicholas IV take over the defense. All the noble lords of the central province were interrogated by the central government to prevent the ambush of the shapeshifters. Fortunately, these shapeshifters are strong in their transformation. Their strength is very weak. Yes, this interrogation is very significant. It can basically consolidate the chaotic situation of the central province into an iron plate, Bai Xiaowen said. It's estimated that in another 2 or 3 days, Nicholas IV will have the ability to lead his army to the west and assist Count Denton. Cecilia looked at Bai Xiaowen's confident expression. Her heart throbbed inexplicably, accompanied by a strong sense of pride. Dior, Nicholas IV asked me to thank you. He also asked you what we should do next. Bai Xiaowen smiled bitterly and shook his head. We don't have enough information. It's hard to give any valuable suggestions. Since the shapeshifters have appeared, I'll say 2 things that you need to pay attention to. First, the shapeshifters' hidden targets may not only be the noble lords themselves. Their heirs should also be included in the list of targets to be interrogated, and the scope of the investigation should be expanded. Second, when Nicholas IV goes to the west, pay attention to Count Denton's vanguard. Cecilia's expression was normal when she heard the first, but the second made her expression change slightly. Dior, you mean that Count Denton may have been replaced by the shapeshifters? Although the possibility is relatively small, it can't be completely ruled out. Nicholas IV is personally leading the expedition, and there's no crown prince. This means that the fate of the whole country is tied to him alone. If I were a rebellious noble of the West San province, or an underground monster, I would definitely make Nicholas IV the first target of my assassination. Bai Xiaowen said slowly, Nicholas IV is a rare strong leader. He's very powerful, and he's also protected by the Imperial Army. Normal assassination methods won't work. Therefore, this method of using the shapeshifters to approach Nicholas IV in a roundabout way and when he's not on guard, we need to pay more attention to it. When the time comes, the vanguard led by Count Denton, or at least all the high-ranking officers in the army, will have to be interrogated by Archbishop Arlo. Chapter 1052. Cecilia said, Nicholas IV is already a lord. His template has been upgraded? Bai Xiaowen was not surprised. Well, after all, the commander of the survivors, Great Chief Absalon, was a lord. As the leader of the Orthodox royal camp, it's not surprising that Nicholas IV is promoted to a lord template. Speaking of the survivors, Bai Xiaowen said, the problem of the survivors in the northern province can't be underestimated. Cecilia is now alone outside, and no one is guarding Whitestone Hill or even the northern region. Aren't the survivors all disabled? No, I suspect that the survivors are also related to the underground world. According to the natives, the survivors live in the sinful domain in the far north, a wasteland. But where did the guy called the Lord of Plague come from? Could it be related to the dark creatures of the underground? Bai Xiaowen took a breath and said, now, we still know nothing about the underground world. Is this underground world a divided state of chaos and evil, or a highly centralized state of order and evil? The former is easy to say, but if it's the latter, I'm afraid our territory will face the challenge of an underground empire. Fortunately, there are still a large number of zombies in the northern region. These monsters that attack life without consciousness can be regarded as a barrier for us, Cecilia said after pondering. Yes. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, Cecilia, who is guarding the territory now? It's Tim, the cavalry captain under me. Among the 3 cavalry captains, his strength has improved the fastest. Maybe it won't be long before he grows into a leader-level knight, Cecilia said. This was the benefit of being a spirit world character. When the plane was about to be unified, the level and template of spirit world characters would slowly increase, especially those spirit world characters who had the opportunity to stand on their own and undergo training. It was common for their template to suddenly increase. The progress of the unification plot would also cause the template of the spirit world characters to skyrocket, such as the 7 divine tool lords in the Black Tide plane. You still have a means of communication between you and the territory, right? Bai Xiaowen confirmed. Yes. Cecilia nodded. Back when Bai Xiaowen was in the Kane dimension, he had received a magical communication talisman from Prince Nicholas. However, it could only be used in the Kane dimension and could not be brought out. However, now that Bai Xiaowen had his own territory, he could store these treasures in Kane's realm. Cecilia can still use it. Inform Tim to station troops in Black Rock City and set up sentries in the north of Black Rock City to prevent the invasion of the remnants, Bai Xiaowen said. Now, Black Rock City was no longer the largest city in the northern lands. Following the migration of high-level talents and refugees, Black Rock City was now desolate. Most of the people left behind were middle-aged and elderly citizens who did not have the ability and were unwilling to move. Among the residents of Black Rock City, there was a consensus that they would rather live in the outskirts of White Rock City than live in the city. Back then, moving Black Rock City was only a temporary measure because the laws of the empire stipulated that nobles and feudal lords were not allowed to attack each other. As for occupying the other party's city, that was an even bigger taboo. Bai Xiaowen was not sure when the empire's intervention would come, so he took the initiative to rob all the talents in Black Rock City, directly causing Black Rock City to decline. Now that the situation had changed, Bai Xiaowen had been made the great feudal lord of the northern lands. Black Rock City had become one of his rightful territories. Of course, Bai Xiaowen did not intend to move the population back. What the northern lands lacked the most now was population. Ensuring the prosperity of the capital, White Rock City, was the #1 priority. The other abandoned castles in the northern lands, including Black Rock City, could be delayed. At least until White Rock City was overcrowded, then they could consider the migration issue. Bai Xiaowen gave a few more instructions to Cecilia and she returned to the Kane Dimension. Kane Dimension, West Sands Province. In the tower of an ancient castle. A silver-haired youth stood on the top floor of the tower, looking into the distance to the east. Caw, caw, a black-feathered crow flew over from afar at high speed. There was a red thread wrapped around the crow's claws. The silver-haired youth raised his arm and let the crow land on his wrist. He reached out and pulled the red thread. There was a flash of magical light and a scroll appeared. The youth opened the scroll. Footsteps sounded. Who is it? The silver-haired youth rolled up the scroll vigilantly. It's me. A golden-haired youth wearing a red priest's robe stepped onto the top floor of the tower. He smiled and said, Andre, you're still so vigilant. There's no need for that, right? It's not like you don't know the class monitor's identity. Now, the entire Boswell Manor is our backyard. You'd better not be so careless, Alberta. The silver-haired youth called Andre had a cold expression. He said slowly, there's an old saying in Huaxia, 1,000 miles of dike can be destroyed by an ant's nest. Sometimes, the collapse of an overall plan stems from the small details. Alberta shrugged. Okay. As expected of the leader of the intelligence team, the chief strategist of Class 129. You're really careful. Did the class monitor tell you this? He likes the ancient slang from Huaxia the most. It's not slang, it's wisdom. Andre glanced at him. Okay, you're right. Let's change the topic. So, what news did you just get from the Central Province? Andre's expression was calm. I don't think there's a need to discuss these issues with you. Hey. Don't be so cold. I'm one of the 4 team leaders after all. In terms of the number of team members, my support team has a higher status than your intelligence team, Alberta said with a smile. What plan did you come up with for the class monitor? Tell me, maybe I can give you some valuable advice. Andre ignored him. He turned around and went downstairs, leaving behind a sentence. He said, according to your logic, the number of team members determines the status. Does that mean that the 2 Earth natives have a higher status than us? Alberta opened his mouth but didn't say anything. Keep your thoughts to yourself, Alberta. The greatest achievement of this unification must be obtained by the class monitor. No one can take it away. Okay, I'm going to find him to discuss the next step of the plan. You'd better do what you have to do. Otherwise, you know the class monitor's temper. Looking at Andre's thin and weak figure slowly going downstairs, Alberta's face darkened for a moment. However, it disappeared without a trace and a bright smile appeared on his face again. He hurried a few steps and caught up with Andre. Don't worry. My loyalty to the class monitor is no lower than yours. Also, I'm just a small team leader. What right do I have to threaten the class monitor? I'm just here to remind you to be careful of the vice class monitor, Richard. He's very ambitious. In terms of background, he won't be afraid of the class monitor's identity. Chapter 1053. Cough, 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 cough. A violent cough sounded, intermittent but heart-wrenching, making people worried that the owner of the cough would die in the next second. The silver-haired teenager, Andre, came to the ward but did not go in. After a while, the coughing subsided. Respectful greetings were heard from the two maids of Duke Bosuvius. Then, the door was opened from the inside, and a brown-haired young man strode out. The brown-haired young man had a strong body like a bull, and his muscles were like a marble sculpture painted with silver hooks and iron. His nose was high, and he had square facial features like an ancient Greek handsome man. His pair of brown eyes squinted, reminding people of a sleeping lion on the grassland for no reason. "Sir," Andre said softly. It should be noted that in Andre's view, the brown-haired young hunter in front of him was his original appearance, not the appearance transformed by the rules of the spiritual realm. "Andre," the brown-haired young man said lazily, "I've told you a few times, just call me by my name, Ogiest. After all, my fake name here is also Ogiest. You won't expose me if you call me that." Andre still wanted to speak, but Ogiest's big hand had pressed on his thin shoulder. "Andre, you are my most valued think tank. In the words of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, you are my strategist. Our relationship should be as perfect and flawless as General Sun and Governor Zhou's." A smile appeared on Andre's pale face. "I hope to be your Zhuge Kongming." "Ah, spare me, I don't like to be a monarch like Long-Ear Lu." Ogiest joked, then said, "You came to me, what new information do you have?" Andre put away his smile and became serious. "I just got the news that Nicholas IV in the Central Province has made a big move." Ogiest forced himself to listen and said, "Well, the new Gorse Emperor has finally become smarter." "I don't think Nicholas IV has become smarter, but someone is guiding him," Andre said. "Huh. And the person who guided him should be the same as us," Andre continued. "How do you know?" Ogiest was interested. "I smell the scent of a chess player. A chess player has joined the Gorse royal family's camp. Tell me the reason. Isn't it possible that the Plantagenet Emperor found a clever spirit world figure to be his advisor?" "It's not like that." Andre shook his head and said, "Monitor, compared to the people of the spirit realm who follow the rules, the biggest characteristic of people like us is that we're eager for quick success and instant benefits. In order to obtain instant results, we can even break the rules and do nothing. The person who convinced Nicholas IV to disregard the rules of the nobles and use an excuse to force other nobles to open up their territories. He also took the opportunity to control the nobles in the Central Province in the name of investigation." Andre paused for a moment before concluding, "Such a style of action has a strong smell of an awakened. Now that you mention it, it does seem to make sense." Ogiest scratched his head. "It's strange. Our Divine Court training camp, Class 129, has already informed the other territories through various channels in the Star Alliance about our entry into the Kane dimension. Why would an awakened at the level of a grand unification come to stand against us? Normally speaking, if an awakened from the Star Alliance who received the news wanted to hitch a ride to the grand unification achievement, they should join the camp of Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp. However, the result of doing so was often to be expelled and killed by the masters of the Divine Court training camp. The experts of Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp naturally wouldn't allow anyone to steal their contribution. The overall contribution for the unification of the Divine Court training camp was a constant one. If an outsider stole their contribution, the total contribution allocated to Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp would be reduced. This was absolutely unacceptable for the powerful experts of the training camp. If they stood against the masters of the Divine Court training camp, they would be asking for trouble. With the luxurious lineup of Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp, any kind of opponent who joined would be a piece of cake. the only thing that could stop the grand unification of the Divine Court training camp was luck. Without triggering the main storyline related to the grand unification process, everything was just empty talk. No matter how strong the awakened were, they could not resist the return of the rules of the spiritual realm. This was also the reason why Andre's position was so important. He shouldered the mission of unearthing multiple main storyline missions. He could almost be regarded as the brain of Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp. Of course, he had no decision-making power. He had to persuade Ogius to agree with his suggestion. Just like the counselors of the ancient Huaxia, the degree of trust of the Lord directly determined the extent of their power. In the Star Alliance, there were also organizations that could fight against the Divine Court training camp. However, under normal circumstances, those large organizations were not interested in coming to the Kane dimension specifically to go against the Divine Court training camp. The result of doing so was likely to be a lose-lose situation. No one could complete the grand unification. Every time such a large-scale operation was carried out, the cost was quite high. Although the large organizations were rich and imposing, they would not waste resources on any dispute. Generally speaking, after receiving the Divine Court's notification, the other large organizations' awakened training camps would choose other dimensions to try for the grand unification. They would not forcibly come over to cause trouble. This was what made Ogius feel strange. Could it be an Earth native? Ogius thought carefully and raised a suspicion. It was rare for him to think carefully. An Earth native? Andre frowned and said, the possibility is relatively small. The other party can persuade Nicholas IV to accept his suggestion. He must have a high status, at least equivalent to an A-class ticket on Earth. The natives who can get such a ticket can generally receive the notification of the Divine Court through their own channels. Oh, don't think so much, brother. Ogius laughed and said, no matter who he is, he just adds to my fun. Tell me, what should we do next? In the Central Province, we still have a few team members lurking. Should we ask them to add fuel to the fire? No, Andre rejected directly. Their successful infiltration is a nail in the heart of the Gorse Empire. As long as we wait for the right opportunity, such as when Nicholas IV is on his expedition to the west, we can get the greatest benefits by letting them rise up. If they come out now, they will just be giving them away for free. There is no value in it. After a pause, Andre said, the most important thing now is how to deal with the coming western expedition of Nicholas IV. Chapter 1054. This is indeed a problem. The combat power of the Empire's regular army is quite strong. I mean compared to Bosui's private army. Ogius said with a slight headache. Although they have undergone special training, it is still too difficult for them to have the combat power of the Empire's regular army in just 10 days. Moreover, the number of monsters in the underground world is not enough to fight against the Empire's regular army. Yes, so we must first get rid of the Empire's nail in the West Sand Province, Andre said. You mean Count Denton? Ogius laughed. That's easy. Although Bosui's private army is weak, it is enough to be cannon fodder. When I get rid of Denton, the Empire's vanguard will be defeated. This tactic was suitable for the situation where the enemy's commander was not strong. It was impossible for Nicholas IV to lead the Empire's army, because Ogius knew that he could not get rid of a lord. It is not difficult to defeat Denton. After all, he is only a rare leader. But how can we make Denton use his value? Andre shook his head. Make Denton use his value? Ogius scratched his chin. Well, then change the tactic. Secretly get rid of Denton, then let the shape-shifting monsters disguise themselves. While Nicholas IV has just arrived and is unprepared, we can trick him. As long as Nicholas IV is seriously injured, I am confident that I can defeat the Imperial army. No. Andre shook his head. Why? Ogius was a good lord who humbly accepted advice. According to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms he had read, all the lords who humbly accepted advice succeeded. Those who did not listen were doomed. His favorite, Bofa's son, died young because he did not listen to his counselor's advice. Andre explained, first of all, when the Gorse Empire was investigating the shape-shifting monsters in the central province, they had already expanded the scope of their investigation. Even the heir is included in the investigation. In other words, they are very wary of the shape-shifting monsters. As for Count Denton, who is meeting for the first time, they will most likely interrogate him strictly. This plan will not work. After a pause, Andre continued, and most importantly, I do not want Nicholas IV to die just like that. Augeas tilted his head. I don't quite understand. Nicholas IV has passed away, and the Empire is in a state of disunity. Who will help us deplete the power of the underground monster empire? Andre sighed. Currently, Cain is in a three-way balance of power. The Gorse Empire is the strongest, just like Chaomengda in the north. The underground monsters are weaker, just like Sun Zhongmo and Jiangdong. We are the weakest, just like Lu Xuanda before the Battle of Red Cliff. In the Battle of Red Cliff, Chaomengda should have been captured by Zhuge Kongming, but when he was deploying, he deliberately arranged for Guan Yunchang and Huarong Dao. Why? Andre answered his own question. Because he didn't want Chaomeng to die. If there was no Chaomengda, Sun Zhongmo would have no one to suppress him, and he would have grown rapidly. At that time, Lu Xuanda would not have had the strength to contend against him. Andre sighed inwardly. Being August's think tank wasn't an easy job. He had to cater to his fancy. Knowing that Augeas liked the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Andre had also forced himself to read it. As a result, both of them had become experts in the Three Kingdoms. Using the Three Kingdoms as an analogy was often a shortcut to persuading August. I think you're right. It would be better if Nicholas IV was alive. August quickly nodded. To deal with Count Denton's vanguard, we have to let Camille lead the underground monsters to attack, Andre said. In a short period of time, it would be beneficial for us to cause internal friction between both sides. Camille? That earthling? Augeas frowned and said, isn't this handing over the war contribution to her? No matter what, Count Denton is an important character in the plot. When it came to the contribution of the Great Unification process, August would become very sensitive. With Count Denton as the bait, we don't have to worry about Camille not doing her best. As for the war contribution, don't worry, I have already made arrangements. A confident smile appeared on Andre's pale face. All right, we'll do as you say. Oh right, quickly kill the old Duke. Then I won't have to waste 2 hours of my time to accompany him every day, August said in a low voice. Don't rush it. At least wait until you have taken control of the entire Basui territory. Only then can we let the old Duke die. For now, it's enough to keep him in a coma due to his serious illness. You should do something on the surface. You have to shut the mouths of the other nobles. Only then can you take control of the power legitimately. Jinghai Base City, Super Gods Building. According to the agreed time, Cecilia was summoned back to Earth again. This time, the news she brought was even more shocking. Count Denton died in battle. The Empire's vanguard was defeated. Bai Xiaowen digested the news and said slowly, the enemy's reaction is too fast. What do you mean? Li Shi asked. The moment the central province made a move, the Xisha province reacted and defeated Count Denton's vanguard. If this is not a coincidence, it at least means that there are still enemies lurking in the central province. Moreover, they are awakened from the enemy camp who have mastered a special communication channel. Li Shi nodded. The main road between the Xisha and central province has been sealed off. Logically speaking, the news shouldn't have spread so quickly. Cecilia said, there is one detail. According to the report of the defeated vanguard, it was an army of underground monsters that launched the surprise attack. However, Count Denton seemed to have been prepared. He led a small group of elites to break out of the encirclement and left the battlefield. After receiving this report, Nicholas IV thought that Denton was still alive, but then he learned that Denton had died in battle. Wait a minute. Bai Xiaowen caught on to something. How did Nicholas IV learn that Denton had died in battle? Could it be that some of the elites who followed Denton to break out of the encirclement survived and escaped back to Nicholas? No, those elites were also wiped out, Cecilia said. Cecilia said, the reason we know of Denton's death is because Nicholas IV has Count Denton's oath stone. With Denton's death, the oath stone broke. At the moment of the rupture, Nicholas IV saw the scene before Count Denton's death through the image displayed by the oath stone. The oath stone was similar to the warning stone, but in addition to conveying the message of life and death, it could also allow the holder to see some of the images of the victim before they died. It was considered a more advanced magic item. What did he see? Bai Xiaowen asked. Chapter 1055. Cecilia said, the ones who killed Count Denton weren't underground monsters, but a group of humans. Their armor had the Bossaway noble family emblem on it. Nicholas IV also knew the importance of this scene, so he told the court painter to restore the scene as much as possible, and asked me to bring it over for you to see. Cecilia handed over a scroll. Bai Xiaowen unfolded the scroll. It was a painting of the scene before Count Denton's death. To be precise, it was what Nicholas IV saw and remembered. Many parts of the scene were blank and blurry, and from the overall appearance of the painting, it was obviously not up to standard. But this was also Nicholas IV's request. He asked the painter to only draw what he had memorized, without any embellishment or completion, so as not to interfere with Bai Xiaowen's judgment. The most obvious and impressive one was a young man who was as strong as a bull. He was wearing aristocratic armor with the insignia of Bosue. Blood dripped from the greatsword in his hand, and he had a lazy smile on his face. He looked rather lifelike. The other people's faces were not so clear, and they were standing at the back. It seems that this is the person who killed Count Denton, Bai Xiaowen asserted. Since he's a noble from the Bossaway family, the Gorse Empire should have a record of him. Who is this person? It's the eldest son of Duke Bossaway, August Bossaway, Cecilia said. It's strange to say that this August has always been very mediocre, and there's nothing special about him. If it weren't for Duke Bossaway's serious illness, he wouldn't have been able to take charge of the territory's affairs. But after August took over the territory's power, he showed excellent ability, and managed the territory's affairs in an orderly manner. This time, when he killed Count Denton, he showed his strong personal strength. Qiao Rui said, I'm afraid this is a fake. Yes, I also think he's not the original. He should be an awakened. To be able to enter as the eldest son of a duke with real power, this must be a special ticket. Li Shui also expressed his opinion. Bai Xiaowen frowned. It was obvious that Ogiest was an awakened one. What made Bai Xiaowen ponder was a deeper problem. The other team members held their breaths, not wanting to interrupt Bai Xiaowen's train of thought. After a long time, Bai Xiaowen exhaled and said, this is getting serious. I'm afraid we're facing more than just a 5-man team of hunters. Under everyone's astonished gazes, Bai Xiaowen continued to state his judgment. There are 2 possibilities for the hostile awakened who have appeared in the Kane dimension. First, the other party is made up of 3 independent awakened teams. There is cooperation and competition between them, but their common goal is to unify. The basis for this inference is that we already know that there are awakened teams from the old aristocrats faction, and there should be one from the underground monster camp as well. In order to fight for the war contribution of killing Count Denton, the underground monsters couldn't wait to launch a surprise attack. But before the battle, Count Denton had made preparations in advance. This means that someone had secretly warned him through some channels. Who is the person who warned him? Since it's not from our camp, then it's very likely that it's an awakened from the old aristocrats faction. They want Denton to be defeated, but they also don't want him to die at the hands of the awakened from the underground monsters faction. After Count Denton fled, the old aristocrats, that is, this Ogiest, led people to intercept and kill him, and pocketed the war contribution. This means that the awakened from the underground monsters faction is competing with the awakened from the old aristocrats faction, so there are at least 2 teams of hunters. And we've already deduced that there are still awakened lurking in the central province. In a situation where the two teams are competing, none of the teams will divide their forces and send them to the Central Province's camp. Then the awakened from the Central Province should also be a team of their own. Perhaps they have reached a war alliance with the old aristocrats faction. Bai Xiaowen's explanation was very detailed, and his teammates also understood. What's the second possibility? Cecilia was listening attentively. Seeing that Bai Xiaowen was silent, she asked. The second possibility is what I'm most worried about. Bai Xiaowen took a breath. There aren't 3 teams, but a huge awakened team. This awakened team has a clear division of labor. They should have used at least 3 high-level tickets. When they chose to cut in, they chose the underground world, the old aristocrats, and the Central Province's aristocrats. The goal of this huge team is to promote the unification of the Cane Plane and promote all of them to evolvers. Is this possible? The Spirit Realm tickets are randomly matched to the plane worlds. It's very difficult to get all the awakened members of the huge team to be directed to the Cane Plane, Li Shui said. It's indeed very difficult, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Bai Xiaowen sighed. People like us, who know little about the operating rules of the Spirit Realm, can figure out a way to increase the success rate of matching by locating items. Those big forces with deep backgrounds and long inheritances must do it more perfectly. But you also said that the awakened team of the underground world camp is competing with the awakened members of the old aristocrats. Li Shui said. That's right. However, from the results, this level of competition isn't considered a vicious competition because the outcome of Count Denton and the Empire's vanguard army being completely annihilated didn't change. The only difference is who killed them and who contributed to the war. It's within the acceptable range for such a large team to have such a degree of scheming. No matter which speculation it is, there are 2 points in common. First, the other side has a lot of people. Second, the other side's ultimate goal is to unify. Qiao Rui summarized. For us, there are obvious differences between the 2 situations. The most important difference is, who will unify? Bai Xiaowen said. In the end, there can only be one camp for unifying. Will the underground monsters unify the Cane Plane or the old aristocrats? If the other side's teams are relatively independent, then there will definitely be internal conflicts. However, I'm more inclined to the latter guess. The other side's teams all belong to the same large team. Qiao Rui said, if it's a large team, then the camp they chose to unify should be the old aristocrats. Why? Li Shui and Cecilia both asked. Han Su listened attentively and continued to be silent. Because Count Denton's contribution to the war ultimately fell to the awakened members of the old aristocrats' camp. Qiao Rui pointed at the most conspicuous young man in the picture scroll, Ogiest. That's right. This Ogiest should be the leader of the team. He can scheme against his team members and steal their contribution, but not vice versa. The camp chosen by the leader of the team when he cut in must be the one they preset. Bai Xiaowen said with emotion, this Ogiest is very ambitious. Qiao Rui nodded. The old aristocrats should be the weakest of the 3 camps. If they can succeed in their counterattack and unify, their contribution will break through the sky, even if there are so many awakened members participating to share the contribution. As the leader, he should be able to get at least a rare leader class book. If he's lucky, he might even get a lord. Chapter 1056. Qiao Rui was not sure if Augustus could get the Lord-level evolutionary template if he succeeded in his counterattack. Bai Xiaowen had obtained the Lord-level template in his first attempt at unification in the Black Tide Plane. It seemed easy, but how much contribution did Bai Xiaowen make in the process of unification? It could be said without Bai Xiaowen, the Guardian faction would have lost without a doubt. Although the Guardian faction had a great advantage in terms of foundation and scale of power, the number of the deep-sea Nagas, as an invading race, was far less than the Guardian faction with the entire continent behind them. But don't forget the Great Lord's bug-level performance in manipulating the Amitabha's remains, and the Nagas' geographical advantage in the deep sea where they could attack and retreat, as well as the transformation altar, which was a divine tool for farming and development. It was because of Bai Xiaowen's cutting in that the Guardian faction could win step by step. If the evaluation of the scavenger mission was included, Bai Xiaowen's contribution to the Guardian faction would explode. That was why he could get the Lord-level template, but it did not mean that it was easy. Bai Xiaowen spoke. If Augustus succeeds, the possibility of him becoming a Lord-level lord is still very high. Don't forget that he is still the actual ruler of Basui territory. After stabilizing his authority, he can completely kill Duke Basui and inherit the title, or even go one step further and kill Uncle Colomans and ascend to the throne. The Emperor of the Unified Faction will definitely add a lot of points in the settlement. Bai Xiaowen sighed. This kind of game has given me a little inspiration. Who said that the awakened have to work for the people of the spirit world when they go to the spirit world? Establishing oneself as a king and unifying the world sounds more challenging. However, the premise is that you have a high-level ticket. Don't be so emotional. What should we do now? Your territory is in Kane. If it is unified, it will be over, Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, don't give yourself too much pressure. Just do your best. This war is not a fair confrontation for us. Being unable to stay in Kane for a long time is our biggest weakness. Cecilia, don't force yourself. There will be plenty of time in the future. Cecilia nodded. Bai Xiaowen said, when you see Nicholas IV again, tell him not to be in a hurry to march to the west. There are still hidden enemies in the central province. After pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaowen continued, however, the deceased Count Denton was rather special. In Nicholas Ivy's heart, he held a rather high position. At this time, the angry Nicholas IV will certainly not agree to your suggestion of delaying the advance of the army. Then, you will volunteer to stay behind and investigate the enemy spies. It would be best if you can obtain the right to command an army. Bai Xiaowen unfolded the map of Kane. In the past few days, according to the information you provided about the nobles in the central province, I found 4 noble territories that are most likely to be infiltrated by the awakened ones. Start from these 4 territories and check them carefully. Bai Xiaowen drew 4 circles on the central province on the map. Xiao Jun asked curiously, brother, how did you find these 4 territories? Could it be that you have spies in the Kane Plain? Haha. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. He intended to guide Xiao Jun, so he explained in detail, I just started from the mentality of the enemy awakened ones and put myself in their shoes. Which territory is the easiest to infiltrate? Which territory is located at the throat of the central province? Which territory can choke the arteries of the Gorse Empire once there is a rebellion? Consider it all together, and then make some choices based on the number of people that the enemy may have infiltrated. Xiao Jun nodded. In order to train Xiao Jun, Bai Xiaowen had let her follow by his side during the team discussions these days. He even let her know confidential information that only high-level awakened ones like the Grand Unification were qualified to know. For this, he had to pay a penalty of 10,000 psionic energy points. However, Bai Xiaowen felt that it was worth it. The conclusion I found may not be 100% accurate. These 4 territories should be innocent. Don't be too strict, Bai Xiaowen said. Even if a few escaped, it won't be a big deal. As long as a group of nobles doesn't suddenly rebel, the Gorse Empire still has the ability to deal with 1 or 2 rear noble rebellions even if the army is on a western expedition. Don't be too strict. This sentence was said to Cecilia. Cecilia nodded and said, if I carry out an interrogation mission, you can't summon me back at will. Bai Xiaowen wrote something on the scroll, then rolled it up and handed it to Cecilia. I know. After the investigation in the central province is over, regardless of whether there is a harvest or not, you have to give this scroll back to Nicholas IV for him to see. This is another speculation I made based on the situation, and it may be helpful. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, you will be very busy in the coming days, so I won't summon you. If you encounter any problems or critical new situations, contact Whitestone remotely and ask them to give the secret signal when the warehouse is transferred. I will then summon you. Okay. After the agreement, Cecilia returned to the Kane realm again. Phew, all the necessary arrangements have been made. Now, it's up to Cecilia. Bai Xiaowen suppressed the worry in his heart and said with a smile, "Don't think too much. Our rhythm shouldn't be disrupted by this matter. Next, the training will continue as usual, and the other matters in the plan will be carried out in order." Qiao Rui nodded and said, "The auction you asked me to pay attention to has taken shape. There will be an auction in the capital on the 12th of this month. Okay, I need to go there and see if there are any special psionic treasures suitable for Xiaojun to use that can trigger the Awakened Profession Change mission. Moreover, since the last exchange meeting in the capital, our team has accumulated a lot of psionic items that we don't need. It's necessary to participate in this auction and exchange what we need." Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Cane Realm, Central Province. At dawn, when the sun was about to rise, the crowing of roosters sounded in Count Dorel's territory. In Dorel City, the private soldiers on night duty in the mayor's mansion rubbed their sleepy eyes and secretly cursed why the next shift hadn't arrived yet. Suddenly, they were completely awakened by the sound of hurried horse hooves. A team of 500 cavalrymen surrounded the Dorel City Lord's mansion. The leader was a valiant female knight with a gorgeous bow on her back. Of course, these private soldiers didn't know that the female knight in front of them was the famous White Rose Cecilia of the Northland Province. However, this didn't prevent them from seeing the situation clearly. It was impossible to resist. Besides, the defense of the territory had been taken over by the Imperial Army. After these private soldiers recognized that it was the Imperial Army, they had no desire to resist and cooperated to make way. Chapter 1057. Count Dor was a small old man with a shriveled figure. He was only wearing tight white pajamas and looked a little dissatisfied. However, when facing Cecilia, Count Dor wisely didn't explode. He just shrugged and humorously said, "Hello, beautiful Cecilia. It's a pity to see you in such a sorry state. I think you can give me some time to at least put on my formal attire." Cecilia wasn't good at chatting like a noble. She said calmly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Dor, but I have to do business. It's also a good thing for the safety of your territory to investigate suspicious people in your territory." "Ha! My territory, isn't it?" Count Dorel said sarcastically, as if he was a noble. In fact, Count Dor had a reason to be unhappy. At this time, the defense of the Central Province's noble territories had been taken over by the Imperial Army. Otherwise, as a lord, how could he be kicked out of his bed in his own territory? He was in such a sorry state that he didn't even have time to change into formal attire. Cecilia ignored him. She ordered the nobles in Dor's territory to line up and identify them one by one. For Cecilia, who was equivalent to an awakened, it was easy for her to identify the hidden awakened. This was because the illusion function of an awakened was targeted at spiritual world characters. It was ineffective against Cecilia, who was also an awakened. Therefore, as long as the person Cecilia saw was different from the person in the spiritual world, it meant that there was a problem with that person. Cecilia walked first. Sister Selene and the captain of the knights, Phil, followed closely behind. "First one," Cecilia said. Phil looked carefully and said, "White silk pajamas. There's nothing special about them." Sister Selene's eyes flashed with a faint blue light. After looking at them, she said, "They didn't use magic to disguise themselves." Second one. Cecilia's expression was calm as she identified them one by one. As the identification work progressed, the anger in Count Dor's heart slowly accumulated. However, the situation was stronger than the person. Even if Cecilia didn't find anything, Count Dor couldn't do anything to Cecilia. At the very least, she could mock her a little. Count Dorel thought. Suddenly, there was a slight commotion at the back of the group. "What are you going to do?" Two Imperial Army soldiers in charge of security stopped a young noble from Dorel. The young man rubbed his sleepy eyes. "I need to relieve myself. Lady Cecilia has ordered that no one is allowed to leave before the investigation is over. Please, do you want a cultured noble to relieve himself in front of a lady?" That's ridiculous. The young man smiled and handed over 2 gold coins from the Gorse Empire. One of the Imperial Army soldiers subconsciously wanted to take the gold coin, but the other pulled his companion back warily, took a step back, and raised his weapon. Return to your formation. Ha! Damn it, I clearly didn't want to make a move. The young noble's eyes suddenly became fierce, and his sleepiness disappeared without a trace. He raised his hands, and 2 cold lights flashed. Immediately, 2 Imperial Army soldiers covered their necks and fell down, blood spurting out. A female noble from Durrell saw this scene and screamed, "Lord of Light! Joseph, what are you doing?" The young noble named Joseph didn't answer. Light flashed under his feet, and he suddenly accelerated. Now, everyone could see that there was something wrong with him. Sister Serene, who was standing beside Cecilia, raised her hands and prayed loudly. A beam of light shot down and turned into a cross, nailing Joseph to the ground. Joseph's body flashed, and he was released from the control state. He ran wildly. "Stop!" Cecilia and Phil mounted their horses and chased after him with a group of Imperial Army soldiers. On the other hand, the mounted archers that Cecilia brought from the northern lands knocked their arrows and launched a rain of arrows at the fleeing Joseph. After Joseph was hit by a few arrows, his speed slowed down a lot. Phil rode his horse and charged forward. He held his lance horizontally, intending to skewer Joseph into a stick of candied hawthorn. However, Joseph used another item, and his body quickly faded and became invisible. Phil lost his target and had to stop his charge. "There!" Sister Serene waved her hand and shot out a light bullet, which exploded in the air. Joseph, who had been carefully escaping like a cat, was directly illuminated. Cecilia took a deep breath and drew her bow. "Sniper arrow, activate!" Joseph felt a chill in his heart. Before he could react, he was hit by the arrow and directly pierced through. The arrow's power was endless. It lifted his body and nailed him to the wall, causing him to enter a state of dizziness. Phil brought the light cavalry down and surrounded Joseph. "Surrender. You have no way to escape," Phil shouted. Joseph didn't look at Phil. His eyes were full of resentment as he looked at Cecilia. "You damn inferior native. You don't know what kind of existence you've provoked. Just wait, we won't let you go." Phil was enraged and thrust his lance at Joseph. However, Joseph turned into a white light and disappeared, leaving only an arrow nailed to the wall and a bloodstain. "Don't be nervous. He has already escaped from our world." Cecilia said simply, "This person doesn't belong to our world. He's an opportunist from another world." "From another world?" Phil was stunned. "Is he the same as the Lord?" "Sort of, but he's not the same type of person as Dior." "Dior is on our side," Cecilia said softly. "What's going on? How can Joseph have such good skills and courage?" "Oh, Lord of Light, what happened?" Earl Durrell said in a daze. "Joseph is my second son. I know him better than anyone. He has always been weak. Some time ago, he had a serious illness and almost died. I'm afraid your second son, Lord Joseph, is already dead." Cecilia said simply, "These opportunists from another world wanted to take advantage of His Majesty's expedition to the west to start a rebellion in the central province. Therefore, they lurked in some noble families and pretended to be your family members." Earl Durrell's suppressed anger disappeared without a trace and was replaced by coldness. "If I didn't agree to the rebellion, I would have been killed by these spies." Cecilia nodded slightly and stopped talking. Instead, she continued to investigate. The difference was that Earl Durrell became more cooperative. Every time he investigated a person, he took the initiative to introduce the person's identity and some simple information. Phew, the investigation of Earl Durrell's territory is finally completed. An enemy awakened has been expelled. Cecilia opened a map and looked at the 4 red circles marked on it. 2 red circles had been ticked. She took out a quill pen and ticked the 3rd red circle representing Earl Durrell's territory. She marked it with a number, 1. Our work is not over yet. There's one more, Murray territory. Let's go. The Imperial Army, led by the cavalry, left in a mighty manner. Chapter 1058. Bossowy Manor. The sound of hurried horse hooves sounded. A noble young man whipped his horse, and a group of Bossowy knights followed closely behind him. The people of Bossowy hurriedly bowed. They recognized the identity of the noble young man, the eldest son of the Duke, the first heir, Sir Auguste. Sir Auguste. A woman with a plump figure and a pretty face, dressed as a maid, was standing in front of the manor house with a small bread basket in her hand. She looked shyly and timidly at Auguste, who was riding a horse and had a strong body like a god of war. The routine patrol ends here. Auguste saw the maid and smiled. He waved his hand to signal the Bossowy knights to return to the barracks. He jumped off the horse and handed the reins to the servant next to him. He strode forward and hugged the maid's slender waist. "Nywenly, didn't I ask you to sleep a little longer?" Auguste leaned closer and whispered, "After all, last night was the first time you really became a woman." The maid, Nywenly, who was once a young girl and was now a young woman, blushed and showed her shyness. "Nywenly missed Sir Auguste. When I woke up and didn't see you, I got up. I'm the heir after all. My father is seriously ill. I can't fall behind on what I should do. Otherwise, I'll be lectured by André again." A smile appeared on Auguste's face. Amidst the young woman's exclamation, he picked her up. "However, now that the business is done, it's time to do morning exercises with my little baby." However, just as Auguste kicked open the door, he heard a voice. "Moss. Sir. You're back just in time. I have something important to report to you." Auguste saw the long-awaited think tank, André, and shook his head with a sigh. He put down Nywenly and patted her butt. "Baby, you go back to the bedroom first. I'll be there soon." After the spiritual world figure left, Auguste immediately restrained the playful expression on his face, but he was still a little lazy. "Go ahead, André. What's the situation?" André glanced at Nywenly, who turned around and left leisurely. He sighed in his heart but didn't speak. He wasn't going to speak bluntly on such matters, so as not to annoy Auguste. Something happened to Morgan and Jet from the intelligence team. They were kicked out of Kane. Auguste stared. "It's my fault." André sighed and said, "I was too anxious and let the opponent see through my weakness." "What do you mean?" Auguste scratched his head. "What I'm saying is that we attacked the vanguard too quickly. The moment the mutated monsters in the central province were cleared, they reacted. It was this reaction speed that allowed the enemy to deduce that there were still our spies in the central province communicating with each other." André ran his fingers through his silver-gray hair. His tone did not change much. "It seems that this new player is quite skilled." Not only did he speculate that there are spies in the central province, but he also realized that the spies are awakened. The spies we planted in 2 key territories in the central province have been removed. From now on, we have lost control of the central province. Auguste knitted his brows and said, "Jet and Morgan, these 2 fellows, can be considered as half a backdoor entrant, right? Their strength was average, but they were located in the central province, so their strategic position was very important. Your intelligence team only has 4 members in total. Losing half of them in one go is a heavy price to pay. But looking at you, you don't seem to care." André said, "It has already happened. There's no point in regretting it. I have raised the psychological level of the opponent's player, and I won't make the same mistake again. Besides, if they think that everything will be fine after clearing out the 2 spies in the central province, they are too naive. I still have the means to monitor Nicholas Ivy's every move." Auguste suddenly said, "That's right. Although your intelligence team lost 2 people, the remaining 2 are the real elites. Although the opponent saw a flaw in you, he couldn't see through everything. This is also the opponent's weakness. They are much worse than you. In the end, it's because we're too strong. Andre was not proud. They didn't expect us to be such a big organization. They thought it was just a small team of awakened ones. They didn't expect our determination and ability to act. Next, let's act according to the original plan. Inform Camille that it's time for her to show her value. Speaking of Camille, Auguste felt a little guilty. We just robbed Denton of his killing contribution. She should be full of resentment, right? She led the team to defeat the Empire's vanguard and also got a lot of war contributions. It's her own fault for letting Count Denton go. Monitor, you helped her clean up her mess. She can't thank you enough. How can she be resentful? Andre said faintly. In terms of status, she is just a native of Earth. If it weren't for the Rockefeller family background, she wouldn't even be able to enter Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp. What right does she have to be resentful of you, Monitor? Auguste scratched his head. Well, sometimes I feel that you are a natural politician. You are much thicker than me. Well, you can make up for my shortcomings. Andre smiled and said sarcastically, Monitor, you care so much about Camille's feelings because you have some thoughts about her. Auguste grinned. Andre shook his head. As long as you become an absolute powerhouse, no matter what kind of woman, they will take the initiative to throw themselves at you. However, I still hope you spend less energy on women. The women of the spiritual realm that you have brought out are about to form a company. Ha ha ha. Auguste didn't feel embarrassed at all. He even felt a little proud. Only beautiful women and companions can't be let down. In a dark valley. Camille. Yes, Mistress Cynthia. The conversation was between two slightly pale-skinned drows. Drows were creatures that lived in the dark and harsh underground environment. They belonged to a subspecies of elves. Legend had it that more than 10,000 years ago, the god of elves banished some of the corrupt and evil elves to the underground. These exiles lost the favor of the god of elves and turned to believe in the evil and absurd Spider Queen, Lolth. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, the drows, also known as the Dark Elves, formed a hierarchical matriarchal society. The supreme ruler of each tribe was called the Mistress. They had completely abandoned the kindness of elves, their love for nature and life, and other beautiful qualities, and had become a cruel and elegant underground monster. Of course, these legends only existed in historical dramas. They were the background of the Cane Plain. Chapter 1059. You did a good job in the previous battle. It was because you suppressed the Empire's commander, Denton, that the great Nosolis tribe could easily defeat the Empire's vanguard, Matriarch Cynthia said with a smile. It's a pity that Denton escaped. Camilla, or rather, Camille, did not sound relaxed. Don't blame yourself. It's because I didn't make a move. I have a long-term plan. Count Denton's death at the hands of Lord Bosuvius is more valuable than his death at your hands. I ordered you not to pursue at that time for this reason. You're also very obedient. This is what I like about you. Matriarch Cynthia smiled gently. Although the matriarch had shown her kindness, Camille did not relax at all. Looking at the matriarch's gentle smile, she even felt a chill in her heart. Camille's identity this time was a noble member of the Nosolis tribe in the Drows Empire of the underground world. If they had a choice, Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp would not give such a key position to Camille, a native of Earth. In fact, in the Divine Court training camp, it was an open secret that the Star Alliance students discriminated against the natives of Earth. The reason for all of this was only one word: gender. The Drows Empire was a matriarchal society. The status of men was extremely low, even lower than the status of women in the feudal society of the ancient Huaxia, where men were superior to women. And the Star Alliance students in the training camp, those in the hero profession, were all men. To let the Star Alliance students cut into the Drows Empire, even if they put in 10 times the effort, it was impossible to get any authority. After Camille cut in, she put in a lot of effort to complete the priestess trial mission of the Queen of Spiders Lolth and finally achieved her current position, a high-ranking member of the Nosolis tribe. This priestess trial mission was very difficult, and the price of failure was very serious. She would be turned into a half-human, half-spider monster by the mentally unstable Queen of Spiders Lolth and lose her identity as an awakened. In other words, if Camille failed, she would have to escape the Kane dimension. This meant that she would lose the opportunity to participate in this great unification, and the price would be heavy. Fortunately, she succeeded. As a newly promoted priestess, her words carried a lot of weight in the tribe. This invasion of the surface world, the Nosolis tribe was so active because of her persuasion. However, even so, Camille was still very careful in front of the matriarch. These days in the cruel society of the Drow Empire had made Camille clearly aware of the horror of this race. What kinship, friendship, love? In this cruel race, all of these were luxuries, or rather, they were all dog shit. No one had these things, and no one cared about these things. All the Drows were thinking about conspiracies and how to survive better in society at the expense of others. The Drow nobles, who had a long heritage and had received good education, were even more adept at scheming. Civilians simply couldn't beat them. As the top echelon of the entire tribe, the matriarch Cynthia was undoubtedly a master of scheming. In the face of the matriarch's praise, Camilla could only lower her posture. This is all thanks to the great matriarch Cynthia's command. Camilla is only following your orders. You don't have to be humble. You have the right to be proud. I don't believe you, thought Camille. Mother Cynthia smiled and said, then, what do you think we should do next? Camille's heart skipped a beat as she remembered the class leader's instructions. Matriarch, now we have defeated the Empire's vanguard, but this is only the beginning. The army led by Nicholas IV has already left for the Shisha province. Only by defeating them can we truly rule the surface world. Matriarch Cynthia said faintly, Camilla, what I want to hear is the specific action steps, not these things that a 3-year-old child knows. Camille's heart trembled, and she whispered, there's news from Bossaway's territory that they have grasped the route of Nicholas Ivy's army and found a suitable place to carry out an ambush. With that, Camille handed over a simple map with a place name circled in bold red pen. It's this place called Griddle Canyon. I've seen it, and this place is indeed suitable for us dark elves and underground races to carry out a surprise attack. Then, what do you think? Matriarch Cynthia asked, seemingly inquiring. Just as Camille was about to speak, she instinctively sensed that something was wrong. She paused for a moment and suddenly changed the topic. Matriarch, Camille believes that this is Lord Bossaway's scheme. His goal is to let us and Nicholas IV both suffer, and then take the opportunity to jump out and clean up the mess. Yes, you're right. Matriarch Cynthia nodded with satisfaction. You didn't disappoint me and proved your worth, Camilla. If you can't see this, you won't be able to pass the trial of the Spider Queen and become her priestess. Camille's heart turned cold. If she had followed Andre's instructions and continued to encourage Matriarch Cynthia to ambush Nicholas, it was hard to say what would have happened in the end. Perhaps Matriarch Cynthia wouldn't touch her for the time being, but losing the trust of a matriarch was also a very serious crisis for a newly promoted priestess of the Spider Queen. Matriarch Cynthia naturally didn't know what Camille was thinking, and she sneered. The nobles of the Shisha province are still far from being able to use a Strauss. Camilla, tell them that the army of the Drow Empire hasn't finished assembling, and it will take at least 10 days for them to have the ability to fight Nicholas IV. If they're in a hurry, go find Nicholas first and test the strength of the opponent. The strength of the nobles of the Shisha province against Nicholas IV is like an egg against a rock. They won't agree to this, Camille said. No, they will. Matriarch Cynthia sneered. Because Nicholas Ivy's first target will be them. Do you really think that the escape of the Vanguard commander named Denton was a coincidence? No, it's just because I didn't do it on purpose. The moment Bossaway's private army killed Denton, they were destined to become the first target of Nicholas Ivy's hatred. Just watch. As long as they don't encounter any obstacles along the way, the Western Expedition Army of the Gorse Empire will inevitably drive straight to Duke Bosaway's manor and castle. In order to protect their foundation, the nobles of the Shisha province can only fight to the death. We, the Drow Empire, are the hunters who have the last laugh. Camille understood. We just need to lurk near Bosaway's manor and wait for the opportunity to join the battlefield, and we can clean up the mess. That's right. Although Bosaway's private army is very weak, they rely on the castle's defense and will definitely cause a lot of casualties to Nicholas Ivy's Imperial army. We just need to wait until the Imperial army breaks through the castle and enters the city, and then we can kill our way out in one fell swoop. We can then defeat the regular forces of the surface humans and gain a firm foothold in the Shisha province. Matriarch Cynthia said with a smile. Then, with the Shisha province as our base, we can enjoy the rich resources of the surface world and develop rapidly. As for the underground world, let the other two tribes compete with the monsters in the plague territory. We don't need it. Chapter 1060. The sound of hooves was as rapid as raindrops. A group of more than 10 riders galloped on the dry sand, causing large clouds of dust to rise with the wind. Madam Cecilia, as a commander, it's very dangerous for you to leave the protection of the army without permission. It's the same for you in the army. Sister Serene, who was covered in a nun's robe, advised in a low voice. I know. Cecilia's expression was calm. But I received the latest instructions from Dior. We have to catch up with His Majesty as soon as possible. We don't have to worry about our safety. As for the army, I'm assured with Phil leading it. All right then. Light bless the Empire, Sister Celine said with a sigh. Cecilia had no choice but to leave the main group. No matter how fast the army moved, they couldn't maintain a high speed for long. However, Cecilia had brought more than 10 riders, each riding 2 horses, which could save the most time. Now, time was everything. The small group swept through the forest like the wind. Suddenly, Sister Celine's expression changed slightly. She said in a low voice, "Wait." Cecilia nodded and raised her hand. Amidst the neighing of the horses, more than 10 riders reined in their horses. They went from a high speed to an extremely still state, displaying excellent horse control skills. Sister Celine closed her eyes, and an invisible spiritual power spread out. What happened? Cecilia asked. Sister Celine opened her eyes. I don't know if it was an illusion, but there seemed to be a few people in the forest just now. But after I checked carefully, they seemed to have disappeared. There's such a thing? Cecilia looked coldly at the small forest. Most of the trees were withered, and the ground was covered with withered yellow wormwood. Should we go in and search? A rider asked. No need, Cecilia said coldly. Set the fire. More than 10 riders galloped on their horses and set the small forest on fire. The withered trees were undoubtedly the best fuel. Soon, a big fire began to spread, and thick smoke rose into the air. Sister Celine said in a low voice, Is it worth it to waste so much time for a few people of unknown origins? Cecilia shook her head and said, I trust my intuition. Actually, the reason Cecilia wasted time setting fire to the forest was simple. She had already determined that the people in the forest must be enemies of the Imperial army, and they were most likely awakened ones. If they were part of the Imperial army, there was no need for them to hide their auras. They could even hide their auras to the extent that even Sister Selene, a leader who specialized in mental strength, could not detect them. People from the spiritual realm generally did not have such great abilities, nor were they so vigilant. Soon, 3 figures dashed out of the dense forest amidst the smoke and fire. Drows! Sister Celine exclaimed. Cecilia's eyesight was better. She saw the 3 figures clearly as soon as they escaped the fire. There were 2 men and 1 woman. It was worth mentioning that Cecilia did not see any characteristics of the drows, such as pale skin and long ears. From her point of view, she saw 3 normal humans. The spirit world's characters have deviated from my perspective. Cecilia's lips curled into a smile. She knew very well what this meant. Chase. We have to catch at least one of them, Cecilia said loudly. The riders mounted their horses and galloped with all their might. At first, the three of them were moving side by side, but when they realized that the riders were hot on their heels, they immediately split into three and fled in three different directions. However, Cecilia had her eyes on the female drow in the middle. She knew very well that the drows were a matriarchal society, and an awakened who could enter as a woman had a higher status. Moreover, the two male drows fled in different directions, confirming Cecilia's judgment. These three were awakened ones. If they were natives, based on their cultural background, if the lowly male drows dared to abandon this female priestess and become deserters, they would be fed to spiders even if they escaped back to the tribe. After a short chant, Sister Serene threw out a truth's trial. The glowing cross fell from the sky and nailed the female drow to the ground. The other party obviously had a way to dispel the control. With a flash of white light, she dispelled the control in an instant and continued to run wildly. Cecilia galloped at full speed and drew her big bow. In the state of riding and shooting, Cecilia, as the leader of the archers, could exert more power. She shot an arrow, and the arrow seemed to travel through space, breaking through the sound barrier and going straight to the female drow's back. However, the female drow's strength was obviously not weak. The moment Cecilia drew her bow and aimed, she sensed the danger, as if she had a pair of eyes on her back. When Cecilia's arrow left the bowstring, she also shot out a white spiderweb-like thing from her hand, which stuck to a short tree in the distance. She pulled hard and swung over like Tarzan, narrowly avoiding Cecilia's arrow. But Cecilia's pursuit was far from over. The horse under her was still galloping, maintaining the distance between the two sides and not widening. Cecilia, who was on horseback, had already shot a second arrow. "You forced me to do this," the female drow said coldly. The female drow said coldly. She turned around and crouched between the branches of the short tree. With a flip of her hands, two silver guns were already in her hands. Of course, in the eyes of the spiriters, she had only taken out two crossbows. The sound of gunshots entered Cecilia's ears. The horse she was riding on took 3 bullets in a row and rolled down in a spray of blood. Cecilia was quite agile. She stretched out her hand and pressed on the saddle, leaping up. She whistled sharply. Suddenly, the space fluctuated, and a mount wolf in rune armor appeared. It caught Cecilia again. The elite mount wolf, Rockback. Rockback's short-distance sprinting speed was even faster than that of the spiritual world's horse, and its ability to withstand damage was far superior. The opponent shot 3 more bullets, and a circle of light shield appeared on the surface of Rockback's body, completely absorbing the damage. In such a short time, Rockback had already rushed to close the distance. "You are Captain White's follower?" The female drow on the branch suddenly stopped shooting, and there was a trace of doubt and disbelief in her tone. Cecilia was slightly startled. She quickly realized that Captain White referred to Bai Xiaowen, or her Dior. The powerful female awakened in front of her was actually an old acquaintance of Dior. "How did you recognize me?" Cecilia did not let down her guard and carefully sized up the other party. "I don't know you." "Ha, of course you don't know me." The female awakened in the tree seemed to be much more relaxed. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Camille Rockefeller. Captain White is my creditor." Chapter 1061. Answer my question. "How did you recognize me?" Cecilia asked. She gestured for the other riders to keep their distance. "Relax, beauty." Camille jumped down from the tree. "I've been keeping an eye on Captain Bai. Not only you, his special follower, but also his new teammates. I've been keeping an eye on all of them. By the way, I've been watching every match of your league. Also, your Mount Wolf has something to do with Captain Bai, right? It looks similar to his summon wolf, but it's not as big. You are also Dior's admirer? Cecilia narrowed her eyes. Camille knew who Dior referred to, so she didn't ask further. She shrugged, her breasts bouncing up and down. She smiled and said, I'm not an admirer. I'm just curious and appreciative. Of course, if Bai is willing, I don't mind starting a beautiful international relationship with him. Tell me about the creditor. Cecilia was slightly relieved. She patted Rockback, took out some jerky from her bag, tore it open, and fed it to Rockback. After feeding it a large piece of jerky, Camille finished telling her how she met Bai Xiaowen, including how she met Bai Xiaowen at the auction, made a deal with him, and even borrowed 100,000 soul points from him. Cecilia scratched Rockback's neck and asked it to return to the Wolf Valley. From Camille's attitude, Cecilia could tell that she wasn't hostile. Since you're in Shisha province, Captain Bai should be here too, right? Camille asked curiously. Where is he? Where is he? Since I'm rich now, I can return the soul points to him. Dior isn't in Shisha at the moment. He's staying in Central Province to command. Cecilia didn't tell her the truth. I see. Camille was a little disappointed. I really want to see him. Your team should have long-distance communication, right? I'll inform him. But how can I contact you again? Cecilia asked. Here, said Camille, offering Cecilia a deal. Cecilia accepted it. What the other party gave her was a charm. Consonance talisman, replica special item. Without the wings of the colorful phoenix, their hearts were as one. When one of the telepathic talismans was activated, the other talisman would be activated passively and mark the location of the other talisman. Unable to cross over. Disappears after use. Cecilia took the telepathy talisman, replica. She asked again, the faction you cut into is the Drow Empire? What's your relationship with the West San Province's aristocratic camp? I'm sorry, I can't reveal that, Camille said, weighing her words carefully. I can't reveal any information about me, and my companions in any way, including oral statements, notes, hints, metaphors, and so on. I can't. Cecilia narrowed her eyes. Then what's the point of meeting the Dior? Camille smiled and said, I don't know what it means either, but since we're fated to meet in the spiritual realm, it's a pity that we can't meet. Camille left, but Cecilia didn't ask her to stay. Although they were on opposite sides, Cecilia still keenly sensed that this was a target that could be fought for. The group of more than a dozen riders set off again. Madam Cecilia, that drow just now is in cahoots with the murderer who killed Count Denton. She's also an opportunist from the otherworld, right? Sister Celine said in a low voice. Yes, but she knows the Dior. Maybe they're not enemies. Oh my God, the relationship between opportunists from the otherworld is really complicated. It's completely different from ours, Sister Celine said. Cecilia didn't say anything. Now, she was also an opportunist from the otherworld, a member of the Awakened. Bai Xiaowen's appearance changed her fate. But fortunately, the Kane realm was still her hometown. The people here didn't see her as an opportunist. I need to leave, Cecilia suddenly said. Huh? Why? Sister Celine was a little surprised. There's new critical information. I have to report it to the Dior as soon as possible. Cecilia took out the drawing scroll that Bai Xiaowen had given her from her storage space. After thinking about it, she put it back. But I'd better get to His Majesty's side first and finish what the Dior told me to do. If Sister Celine and the dozen riders were handed over, Cecilia wouldn't be at ease. The situation in the Shisha province was unpredictable. On the surface, three forces were competing with each other: the Gorse Empire's Western Expedition Army, the Nosolis Tribal Army, and the Shisha province's Noble Private Army. But in reality, the Shisha Noble Private Army was the weakest, but it had the widest source of information. The Nosolis tribe's strength was in the middle, but Matriarch Cynthia was cunning and had a stable position in the fishing boat. The Empire's Western Expedition Army was the strongest, but it had the least source of information. It was almost like they were in the dark about the situation in the Shisha province. Awakened ones from all three factions had joined the fray. Each of the powerful awakened ones had their own little plans. This made the situation in the Shisha province even more difficult to grasp. Under Matriarch Cynthia's surveillance, the Western Expedition Army had already marched into Duke Bosue's territory. The other small noble territories in the Shisha province had basically been abandoned. Thanks to the powerful means of Duke Bosue's heir, the Shisha nobles had gathered their private armies into a coalition army and stationed them in Bosue Castle. Of course, it took a lot of effort to persuade those small nobles to give up their ancestral territories and form a coalition army. Auguste and André had basically been doing this for the past few days. What puzzled Matriarch Cynthia was that the Shisha noble coalition army seemed to have given up on harassing and resisting along the way, allowing the Empire's Western Expedition Army to advance. Stupid! If they had separated an army from Bosue Castle and used the Shisha province's geographical advantage to launch guerrilla warfare, they might have had a chance to support Bosue Castle. But now that all their military forces are guarding the castle, it's equivalent to surrendering a large area of strategic depth. The Imperial Army can besiege the city without any distractions. No matter how strong the city is, it will fall sooner or later. Hearing Matriarch Cynthia's comment, Camille smiled and said, "Although they are stupid, they also meet our strategic plan. They can minimize the Imperial Army's strength and make it easier for us to harvest." Matriarch Cynthia smiled and said, "Well, these idiots' deaths are worth it." It took the Empire's Western Expedition Army a day to break through Bosue Castle. Seeing the vanguard of the Imperial Army pouring in, Matriarch Cynthia suppressed the doubts in her heart and ordered the Drow Army, which had been lying in ambush for a long time, to attack the back of the Imperial Army. Under the situation of being attacked from the front and back, the rear of the Imperial Army collapsed. Chapter 1062. A small portion of the Imperial soldiers fled in all directions, while most of them were driven to Vesuvius Castle in an organized manner by the Drow Army. Wars often broke out in the underworld, and Mother Cynthia was considered a seasoned commander. Driving the defeated soldiers like this was a winning strategy on the battlefield. Although the Imperial Army had a large number of soldiers, their formation would be disrupted by their own defeated soldiers. Sometimes, the enemy's defeated soldiers were more useful than their own army. First, the emotion of fear was contagious, and the escape of the defeated soldiers would greatly reduce the morale of the enemy. Second, if the enemy wanted to maintain their formation, they had to be ruthless and kill their own allies, and there were very few commanders who could make such a ruthless decision. Just as Mother Cynthia had expected, Nicholas IV did not have such courage. A large number of Drow Scimitar warriors were the vanguard, and the spider priests drove the spider elves, mud monsters, and other underworld creatures into Vesuvius Castle. "Kill them all. Camilla, take the heads of the Gorse Emperor and Duke Vesuvius." Mother Cynthia let out a sharp scream, and the Drow army was covered in a layer of blood-red light, and their attack speed and movement speed were greatly increased. However, after Mother Cynthia's scream, Camilla did not appear. "Camilla! Where are you?" Mother Cynthia's mental wave swept across the battlefield, but she did not find her. Mother Cynthia instinctively felt that something was wrong. She looked at the flag of the Gorse Emperor that was close at hand, gritted her teeth, and ordered, "April! Take my elite guards and attack and kill the Gorse Emperor." April was the male partner of Mother Cynthia, and he was also a warrior who was skilled in swordsmanship. In the society of Drows, men without powerful strength were easy to be sacrificed. And even powerful male warriors did not have high status in the tribe. As the fourth husband of the Mother Cynthia, April was not even qualified to participate in the decision-making discussions. After receiving Mother Cynthia's order, April pulled out his scimitar and led a group of Drow Scimitar warriors into the battle. Like a sharp knife cutting through a cake, this elite army charged to the flag of Nicholas IV. But soon, Apulil sent a piece of shocking news. "Mistress, the Gorse Emperor is not here. The one here is a substitute." Although Apulil didn't know the Plantagenet emperor, it was easy for her to determine if he was a substitute. Nicholas IV's strength was mediocre, and he was killed by Apulil in just a few moves. However, the real Nicholas IV had the strength of a lord, and it would not be so easy to take him down. The uneasiness in Mother Cynthia's heart quickly grew. She shouted, "Everyone, retreat!" Just as he gave the order, the ground suddenly began to rumble and shake. Large clouds of green smoke suddenly spread out and quickly spread to every corner of the castle. Bosaway Gold Mine. Andrei stood on a high hill, holding a telescope in his hand and looking at Vesuvius Castle in the distance. The wind ruffled his silver-gray hair. "It's over." The plan went smoothly. Andrei put away the binoculars and made an okay gesture to August, who was waiting below. August revealed a faint smile. He was carrying two people in each of his hands. One of them was an old man in white silk pajamas. His body was dry like dried medicine dregs, and he was panting while being carried in his hand. The other person was a middle-aged man with a big belly, wearing a luxurious prince's outfit. His face was full of horror. "Goodbye, Duke Bosaway, my cheap father." August chuckled. "Do you have any last words?" "Well, if you have any hidden treasures, you can tell me." "The Lord of Light will curse you," the old man in white silk pajamas scolded weakly amidst the violent coughing. "Ha ha ha." August laughed loudly and suddenly threw Duke Bosuvius down, then bent his knee and lifted him up. With a crisp crack, Duke Bosuvius's spine broke, and his body was bent 90 degrees. His old, turbid eyes were wide open, and he stopped breathing. The middle-aged man in luxurious clothes, who was carried in August's other hand, almost peed himself when he saw this scene. "Calm down, Your Majesty Emperor Colomans." August laughed. "I won't kill you because you still have value. But if you don't cooperate, don't blame me for being heartless." "You? What do you want?" Nicholas' uncle, the younger brother of the old Gorse emperor, and the emperor supported by the old nobles, Colomans said with trepidation. "As you can see, my father, Duke Bosuvius, passed away due to illness." August shrugged. "Next, I will take over the position of Duke Bosuvius." Colomans calmed down and nodded. "Of course, I will issue an order and confer you as the new Duke Bosuvius." "Do I need you to confer me a title?" August sneered. "Then, what do you want me to do?" August said. "The nobles who supported you in the West Sand province formed an alliance. Including our Duke Bosuvius territory, there are a total of 7 families. As long as you let me control the military power of these 7 families, I will let you live." 7 families? Isn't it 11? Colomans thought August had remembered wrongly. But the sneer on August's face made Colomans think of another terrifying possibility. He pursed his lips and said, "The other 4 families have been wiped out by you." "No, they died in the chaotic battle between the Empire's Western Expedition Army and the underground monsters. It has nothing to do with me." August shrugged and then put on a fierce expression. "Anyway, you just have to cooperate with me." "What's the problem?" "No problem." Colomans reacted quickly. "Just in case, I still have to give you some backup measures." "Andrei." Hearing August's call, Andrei jumped down and poured a bottle of medicine into Coloman's mouth. "Cough, cough, cough," Coloman said in horror. "What did you give me?" "A bottle of medicine guaranteed to make you obedient. If you don't listen, you will end up worse than my cheap father." August laughed. After sending the dazed Colomans away, August said, "Is everything going according to plan at the castle?" "Yes, you can see that the Empire's Western Expedition Army and the Underground Monster Army are covered by the undead plague," Andrei said. "I wonder if this thing is reliable," August muttered. "Don't worry, it's definitely reliable. This is an improved version of the Lord of Plagues." A man's voice sounded from the entrance of the gold mine. Chapter 1063. Andre's hands drooped slightly as he turned around and faced the man who had just spoken with impeccable politeness. "Hello, Vice Squad Leader." As for Ogiest, he was not so careful and said casually, "Richard, what's the situation in the Plague Territory? The key to the success of our plan lies in the Lord of Pestilence's camp." If Bai Xiaowen were here, he would definitely recognize that this Richard was the Starlink awakened he had encountered in the Aran Plain as Prince Richard. It was also from Richard that Bai Xiaowen heard of the existence of the Starlink for the first time. The sentence "above the Starlink are the gods, below the Starlink are all living beings" also vividly exposed the superior mentality of the Starlink awakened when facing the natives of Earth. At this time, Richard was not so arrogant when facing Ogiest and Andre. Instead, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, Squad Leader. Everything is going according to plan." Ogiest nodded and said, "Very good. Today, we used Vesuvius Castle as bait and successfully captured the Nautiles tribe, the Empire's Western Expedition Army, and all of Nicholas IV's elite armed forces. If the plague virus is really as effective as you say, then it won't be long before these poison people transform into the undead of pestilence and become our allies." After a pause, Ogiest said, "The main point is that the surface world has lost its resistance. Without Nicholas IV and the Empire's regular army, the huge Gorse Empire will only become a pile of loose sand. With this plague army as the vanguard, we can quickly grow from battle to battle and expand the size of the army." Richard smiled and said, "After that, we can go to the underground world for a punitive expedition. The Drow Empire will also be greatly weakened and unable to resist the undead of pestilence. After the basic unification is completed, we will form a group to besiege the Lord of Pestilence and set things right with the conservative nobles' camp." Ogiest smiled and said, "As long as we can complete these steps and unify the weakest conservative nobles' camp, our team will be able to obtain a very exaggerated war contribution. The premise is that we have enough time to stay. The squad leader must become the leader of the camp as soon as possible," Richard said seriously. "There's no hurry now. I still have nearly 10 days left in the third phase of the main mission. In addition, Colomans was of some use. After I take complete control of the conservative nobles and wipe out the remaining military forces of the Empire, I will directly wear the yellow robe and ascend to the throne. It won't be too late to kill Colomans then." Suddenly, Andre's expression changed and he closed his eyes. His psychic fluctuations spread out, and he carefully sensed his surroundings. Then, he opened his eyes and said, "There's an army coming from the southeast. They're very close. They're less than 2 miles away." "What? Where are the sentries? Do they eat for free?" Ogiest said in shock and anger. "Don't blame the sentries. That army seems to have used some sort of concealment method. Otherwise, I would have discovered it earlier." Andre forced himself to calm down. "Squad Leader, Vice Squad Leader, I suggest that we immediately prepare for battle. Right now, we only have the 7 private armies of the conservative nobles. I haven't taken full control of the army yet." Ogiest rushed towards the campsite and said loudly, "I will forcibly gather them. But don't expect the other 6 nobles to contribute much. We can only rely on the private army of Basue." These days, Ogiest had taken control of Basue's territory. With his tyrannical strength and clever methods, he had taken control of the territory's private army. This was also the reason for his brazen patricide. His cheap father, Duke Basue, had lost his value. If he didn't die, who would? Ogiest's next plan was to use the name of the fake Emperor Colomans to reorganize the private armies of the 6 nobles. In the process, he would strengthen his control of the army step by step, turning it into an iron plate. However, this would undoubtedly take time. Currently, the private armies of the other 6 nobles were firmly in the hands of the nobles, and their orders were not unified. The enemy seemed to know that they could no longer hide. They sped up their march, and the 2-mile distance was covered in the blink of an eye. "Damn it! We've been played." Richard, who was in the shadows, looked at the military flag of the Gorse Empire and the oppressive Emperor Nicholas IV with a bitter smile. Nicholas IV and the Imperial Army, who should have been infected by the improved version of the Plague of the Dead in Basui's castle, had actually appeared here. Then who were the Imperial Army in Basui's castle? Charge! Nicholas IV obviously would not give these people an explanation. Seeing that the allied noble army of the West Sand province had just assembled and was in a chaotic formation, as an experienced commander, he would certainly not be pedantic and wait for the enemy to reorganize their formation before attacking. The elite cavalry of the Empire's Western Expedition Army majestically charged into the enemy's formation. Archers shot from the flanks, infantry formations pushed forward, and priests chanted divine spells to buff the soldiers. This was the strength of the Gorse Empire's regular army, the most powerful force on the surface of the Kane dimension. Compared to the war against the survivors in the Northland province, it's a world of difference. Hiding behind Emperor Nicholas IV's guards, Bai Xiaowen commented in the team channel. That's right. At that time, Nicholas only brought Count Denton and an elite unit of the Empire's regular army. There weren't many of them, so he enlisted the noble private army as cannon fodder. The Imperial Army on this battlefield is all regular elites. They're indeed extraordinary. Should we participate in the attack? Qiao Rui asked in a low voice. No need. With the weak combat power of the West Sand aristocrats' private army, they're no match for Nicholas IV. And it seems that the enemy hasn't integrated their army yet. They're in a state of fighting on their own. In this case, even if there are 5 or 10 times more awakened in the Divine Court, they won't be able to reverse the situation. In a war of tens of thousands of people, the awakened could only play a limited role. No matter how strong an awakened was, their physical and mental strength would eventually be exhausted. How many soldiers could they kill? 100? Or 200? Even a summoner like Bai Xiaowen, who had a cheap undead army of summons, would find it difficult to compete with an organized elite army. Unless the enemy's individual strength was too weak, the Butcher could achieve a state of perpetual motion, and the resurrection of the Deliphus corpse, only then would they have a chance. Generally speaking, the Awakened could play the role of surprise troops. In a military battle, they could carry out the decapitation tactic to kill the enemy's commander, causing the enemy to lose command and become chaotic. They could then defeat the enemy as the weak. But Nicholas IV was a lord. It would not be so easy to kill him. Chapter 1064. The White Phoenix team quietly watched the battle, showing an overwhelming advantage. With only a few hunters from the Divine Court training camp, they were powerless to reverse the situation. Well, it's better not to make a move. We still haven't figured out what's going on with Starlink. It's not bad if we can avoid the eyes of the behemoth Divine Court, Bai Xiaowen laughed. We were lucky this time. What if we have to make a move? Qiao Rui asked. Do you even need to ask? Screw them, Bai Xiaowen said. I told everyone not to make a move this time because I think it's not necessary. If there are benefits, even if it's a piece of top-quality gold equipment, I won't hesitate to let you make a move, not to mention it's related to the survival of the territory. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, this time, Camille really helped a lot. She didn't do anything, Li Shui muttered. Haha, Bai Xiaowen's thoughts flew back to 3 days ago. 3 days ago. The night was dim, and the short trees were dark. The atmosphere wasn't very good, but it didn't prevent a man and a woman from dating with the help of the telepathy talisman. Captain Bai, I finally see you. Camille, who had a magnificent career line, walked over with a smile. Aren't you afraid that this is a trap? Bai Xiaowen crossed his arms and leaned against a short tree. The shadow covered his face, making it impossible to see his face. Your eyesight is good. You can see me here. After all, I cut in as a drow. It's normal to have such benefits. Camille smiled. As an underground creature, the drow's dark vision was excellent. Well, back to the topic. This time you took the initiative to invite me to meet with you. You probably want to jump ship, right? You don't seem to have a good time in that so-called big organization, Bai Xiaowen said. Where there are people, there are disputes. It's inevitable in the same organization. Although I don't like this organization, I don't want to leave it. Camille didn't answer directly. So you want to bet on both sides? Bai Xiaowen tilted his head. Let me guess. You don't like this organization, but you don't want to leave. Is it because there is something about this organization that attracts you? For example, unification? Camille gave him a coquettish wink, but she neither nodded nor shook her head. She just stood there with a faint smile. Bai Xiaowen seemed to have gotten the answer. He smiled and said, Sorry, I overlooked something. You can't reveal any information about the organization to the outside world. This should be a confidentiality contract that has been notarized by the rules of the spirit world. It seems that this contract is quite strict. I can't even nod or shake my head. Camille praised, Captain Bai, you're really charming. Bai Xiaowen was basically immune to such words. He began to analyze the pros and cons from Camille's point of view. First of all, the reason why you don't want to leave the organization is because you think that the opportunity for unification is rare. But I can tell you clearly that the organization behind you is not the only one who has the ability to organize the unification of the planes. Yes, you have unified the Black Tide plane. It's very shocking news, Camille said. I can't believe how a 5-person team did it. Haha, it doesn't matter how I did it. The point is that I have the ability to do it too. So, you can bet on me. Compared to your organization, which has dozens of awakened ones working together to complete the unification and share the war contributions, the number of awakened ones on my side is much smaller. It should be more attractive. Camille smiled and didn't respond. Bai Xiaowen once again realized that as long as the conversation with Camille was related to information about the organization behind her, she could only remain silent. However, from Camille's smile, she should be more in favor of Bai Xiaowen's argument about attraction. I'm a little curious. You know that you can't reveal any information to me, so this meeting should be meaningless in your eyes. Why did you give Cecilia the telepathy talisman? As I said to her, I believe that you have a way. It's just that I can't think of how you will do it, Camille said with a smile. You are a man who is good at creating miracles. Besides, even if you can't do it, it doesn't matter. A telepathy talisman in exchange for a date with Captain Bai, I think it's worth it. Okay. In order to live up to your expectations, it seems that I have to show you some real ability. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, I didn't plan to get any information from you so easily when I met you this time. In fact, I already have a basic understanding of the organization behind you, as well as the situation of the major factions in the Kane Plain. All I need is verification. As for the verification method, I don't need your response. You just need to deactivate your psionic power field. Bai Xiaowen walked in front of Camille. I will observe your breathing, pulse, eyes, and other micro-expressions to get the answer. Unfortunately, the night isn't very good tonight. With my eyesight, I can't see the micro-expressions on your face clearly. It would be even better if I had a pair of drow eyes. Please give me your wrist. Breathing, pulse, and micro-expressions were all things that Camille could not control. Bai Xiaowen started from this aspect. As long as he could see through the truth, it would not be considered as Camille leaking the secret. Camille tilted her head, smiled, and reached out her hand to grab Bai Xiaowen's palm. Under the latter's slightly stunned gaze, Camille pressed Bai Xiaowen's palm directly to the left side of her chest. I think I can sense your heartbeat more clearly than your pulse. Bigger, 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 Bai Xiaowen cried in his heart that he could not take it anymore. The ecstasy of his palm was indescribable. However, Bai Xiaowen quickly felt a murderous aura in the dark. Out of a desire to survive, he quickly withdrew his hand, coughed twice, and grabbed Camille's wrist again. He stared into her eyes and said, Then, let's begin. The first inference is that you are currently in a large awakened organization under the Starlink. I've heard of the Divine Court training camp. This organization should be on the same level as the Divine Court training camp. Looks like it's the Divine Court training camp itself. Bai Xiaowen stared into Camille's brown eyes. With his powerful observation skills, he saw that her eyes were slightly dilated and her nose was slightly open. This meant that she was in a state of shock. After Bai Xiaowen confirmed that she was in the Divine Court training camp, he caught a trace of adoration, in her eyes. The look in his eyes confirmed his conjecture. The second inference is that all the forces in the Cain plane have sent awakened to cut in, including the Plantagenet Empire, the conservative nobles, the drows. At this point, Bai Xiaowen dragged out his tone and suddenly said in a serious tone, "And the Lord of Pestilence." Camille almost couldn't hold it in and blurted out, "How did you know?" "I guessed," Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, "but your instincts have already told me that this is the truth." Camille looked at Bai Xiaowen as if she was looking at a monster. "Don't worship me so much. Actually, I, Bai Xiaowen, am just an ordinary person," Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. "In fact, my understanding of the Cain plane is much deeper than you think. This guy, the Lord of Pestilence, I once fought a battle with his vassal tribe. To be honest, those survivors in the north are really fierce in battle." Camille pursed her lips. Chapter 1065. Okay, now for the third inference. Although you have planted awakened in each camp, there is only one camp that you really want to support, or really control, and that is the conservative nobles. Ignoring the surprise in Camille's eyes, Bai Xiaowen said calmly. "Now, let me simulate your plan. The conservative nobles killed Count Denton. Nicholas IV is eager for revenge and will definitely make the conservative nobles his first target. This is not in your interest. If you want the weakest conservative noble camp to grow, you must provoke the Imperial Army and the Drow Army to fight, and the conservative nobles will reap the benefits. I think you should have received a mission to encourage the Drow Army to fight against the Imperial Army." Bai Xiaowen continued, "On the route of the Imperial Army, I found several locations that are more suitable for underground monsters to ambush. When the two sides are almost done fighting, the leader of your organization will lead the conservative nobles and the elite plague monsters to come out and clean up the mess." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. "Am I wrong? What's the problem?" From Camille's physical performance, Bai Xiaowen sensed that something was wrong. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen thought for a few seconds. "Well, it seems that your influence among the underground monsters is still lacking. You don't have the ability to encourage the underground monsters to take the initiative to ambush the Imperial Army. Moreover, the matriarch of the Drows is not a fool. She won't do this kind of self-sacrificing, loss-making business. And your organization also knows this, so they will plan on the premise that the underground monsters will not take the initiative to fight. The Drows will not take the initiative to fight. Then the Imperial Army will march straight in and go straight to the leader of the conservative nobles, Castle Vesuvius. And the matriarch of the Drow's plan should be to take advantage of the Imperial Army's attack on the castle and attack it from the front and back. Based on this point, your organization will not leave the elite troops in the castle to defend the city. That would only lead to a slow death. That's why they withdrew in advance and left Nicholas IV with an empty city." "No!" Bai Xiaowen's eyes suddenly widened. "An empty city won't be able to bait the Drows, and it won't be able to destroy the Imperial Army. Your organization must have done something in the city and left a vicious trap for Nicholas IV. Considering the fact that you've planted spies in the Lord of Plagues, the most likely method your organization has prepared is already on the verge of revealing itself. Undead plague. Moreover, you should have left behind some miscellaneous troops to fight with the Imperial Army, thus attracting the Drow troops. This can also have the effect of eliminating dissidents at the same time. The remaining miscellaneous troops should not be Bosue's direct troops." The amazement in Camille's heart had even evolved into reverence. Bai Xiaowen's guesses up to this point were almost all correct. Even if there were some parts that were off, he could still realize that something was wrong from the slight changes in her body and quickly correct himself. Under normal circumstances, Camille would definitely praise Bai Xiaowen. However, due to the restriction of the contract, She could not express her opinion, so she felt a little uncomfortable holding it in. Hearing the term undead plague, Camille finally could not help but ask, "Where did you hear about the undead plague?" It was obvious that this term was not something that could be thought of out of thin air. Furthermore, since Bai Xiaowen had clearly pointed out this term, Camille's question was not considered revealing information. "I've said before that my understanding of the Cain plane is deeper than you think. I've once fought with the vassals of the Lord of Plagues." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "From the looks of it, your organization's plan is very clear. Use the Plague of the Dead to create a large plague army to help the Lord of Pestilence unify the world and wipe out the other forces. In the process, you can gain the Lord of Pestilence's trust. When he's no longer of any use, you'll find an opportunity to kill the Lord of Plagues and unify the world as the liberators of humanity." Camille's beautiful eyes widened. "Even I don't know about the backup plan you just mentioned. The organization won't tell us the overall plan. However, I'm afraid that your last guess is very likely to be true. You're really a genius. No, you're practically a god. I admire you more and more, Captain Bai." Since Camille did not know about the organization's follow-up plan, whatever she said, regardless of whether she agreed with Bai Xiaowen's deduction, did not constitute a leak. Bai Xiaowen was in a good mood. After all, he had obtained a lot of valuable information. The admiration and adoration of a great beauty made every man feel good. "Actually, I have to thank you for being able to deduce and verify so much information," Bai Xiaowen said honestly. "I didn't do anything," Camille said. "No, you didn't resist at all. You took the initiative to retract your psionic force field. That's the greatest cooperation. If it were someone else who didn't cooperate, even if I subdued them and carried out such a deduction, they would definitely make all sorts of strange expressions to interfere with my judgment. It would greatly increase my workload, and it would be easy for me to make mistakes. Oh my God, don't say anymore. It's easy for me to doubt my own IQ. I'm a top student who graduated with straight A's from Stanford University," Camille said helplessly. In the psionic era, the university's combat department in the United States was different from that in Huaxia. It was easy to enter but difficult to leave. As long as one signed up and passed the ordinary entrance exam, one could join the combat department. However, during the university period, one had to rely on US dollars or one's own performance to compete for various resources. The graduation exam was very strict. If one did not pass the exam, it was absolutely impossible to get a graduation certificate. Stanford University was one of the first institutions of higher learning to be rebuilt in the United States during the psionic era. It was basically at the same level as Yen University and Qing University in Huaxia. Camille graduated with straight A's, which meant that not only was her combat strength outstanding, but her analysis, judgment, intelligence collection, and other aspects were also very outstanding. However, the excellent ability that she was originally proud of was completely exposed in front of Bai Xiaowen. "Captain Bai, I finally understand why you can lead a mere 5-person team and complete the unification of a plane with an average level of level 7 or 8. Camille's eyes were shining. "If I want to be matched with you for the next exploration of the spirit world, what price do I have to pay?" Camille's eyes were almost dripping with water. She moved closer without leaving a trace. The two were so close that Bai Xiaowen could almost see her indescribably proud fair skin when he lowered his head. "My team is full." Bai Xiaowen put down Camille's wrist, took a step back, and said, "But I think you should have a way." Chapter 1066. What can I do? Camille blinked and pretended to be dumb. Bai Xiaowen was speechless for a while. "Miss Camille, don't test my IQ." What a joke. The organization behind Camille could match dozens of Awakened to the same plane at the same time and accurately designate different factions. Camille had no way. She was only pretending to be dumb to save money. All right. Seeing that Bai Xiaowen was about to leave, Camille hurriedly grabbed his hand. I can indeed match up with your team without forming a team and enter the same plane of existence together. But there's a huge price to pay for that. And you need to agree to the binding. How many people do you have on your side? Bai Xiaowen frowned slightly. He remembered that Camille had a few teammates. There are 2 other people besides me. You've seen them before. Camille said quickly. Monica Gray and Luke. Monica, the pharmacist? And Luke, the chatterbox? Bai Xiaowen remembered and nodded slightly. If there are only 3 of you, it's okay. However, I can't guarantee your contribution to the war. Please be mentally prepared. Camille nodded and said, this is normal. The organization I join is the same. War contributions need to be earned by oneself. The Divine Court training camp only recruited Camille. Her 2 teammates, Monica and Luke, were not invited and were rejected by the Divine Court. This was normal. In the eyes of the Divine Court, Camille was recruited because of her background in the Rockefeller family. Monica and Luke did not have such a strong background. Bai Xiaowen smiled and nodded. This was also the reason why Camille was dissatisfied with the Divine Court training camp. She originally had the opportunity to get Count Denton's war contributions, but it was taken away by the leader of the organization. Anyone would be unhappy. After returning from the Black Tide Plain, Bai Xiaowen had not stopped thinking about the unification. Normally speaking, the unification of a plane was definitely not something that could be done by a small team of 5. Bai Xiaowen's presence in the Black Tide realm was entirely due to the existence of the Great Lord, which triggered the help of the spiritual realm's precepts. It was almost the same as cheating. The result of cheating was that his war contribution had been reduced by more than half. This was referring to the S-rank, Hero's Scavenger, mission, which was not included in his evaluation. This was the most painful thing. Otherwise, Li Shi wouldn't be the only one to be promoted to a hero class. Qiao Rui and Cecilia would have been promoted to hero class as well. Han Su wouldn't have only obtained the standard template. According to Bai Xiaowen's calculations, a normal grand unification of a plane would require the close cooperation of 2 to 3 teams to complete it. As for the war contribution, it would definitely be enough to be distributed without cheating, triggering high-level scavenger missions. At the very least, it would be enough to create more than 5 evolved heroes. Therefore, if Camille and her team were willing to follow him, Bai Xiaowen would not reject them just because he was worried that they would not be given enough war contributions. What's more, Camille's surrender had greatly increased Bai Xiaowen's chances of keeping his territory. This favor had to be returned. If he rejected Camille, it would be tantamount to cutting off her path to becoming an evolved person. For her own sake, Camille might turn to the Divine Court training camp again. This would expose Bai Xiaowen and the White Phoenix team to the Divine Court training camp, which would add more variables. Alright, Captain Bai. This was an unforgettable date. I think we've both gotten satisfactory results. I should be leaving. Camille turned around, but she suddenly thought of something and turned around again to say, I'm sorry. There's another important piece of information that I can reveal to you because it doesn't involve the confidentiality contract. It should be helpful to you. It doesn't involve the confidentiality contract? Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes slightly. Please go ahead. We all know that the 3rd stage of the main mission is very important. It's often an opportunity for the unification of a plane. It can provide the awakened people with a longer time to stay in the plane, Camille said mysteriously. However, there's another way to give the awakened people almost unlimited time to stay in the plane. Bai Xiaowen's breathing paused slightly. Camille smiled charmingly. Captain Bai, I rarely see such an expression on your face. Looking at Bai Xiaowen's surprised expression with satisfaction, Camille didn't continue to keep him in suspense. She leaned close to Bai Xiaowen's ear and whispered, this method is for the awakened person who uses the ticket to become the only leader of an important faction. The only leader of an important faction, Bai Xiaowen exhaled and came back to his senses. This news is indeed very impactful. I've never thought that it could be like this. After calming down, Bai Xiaowen quickly grasped the main point. Miss Camille, you mean, the leader of your organization, the awakened person who cut in under the identity of Duke Bosue's eldest son, Augustus, already has a plan to become the only leader of the conservative noble faction? He wants to get rid of Duke Bosue and the fake emperor, Colomans, and ascend the throne himself. Camille smiled and said, I didn't say that. He's someone who has signed a confidentiality contract. Bai Xiaowen didn't care how she acted cute. He thought slowly and said, in this case, some of my previous plans will have to be modified. I originally thought that after delaying your stay, I would be done. Now, it seems that I have to drive him away. Captain Bai, I'll leave this problem to you to worry about. See you next time. Camille turned around, waved her hand, and left quietly. Imperial Army Camp, Temporary Command Tent. Dior, you're finally willing to come. Nicholas IV dismissed his subordinates and stepped forward enthusiastically to help Bai Xiaowen up. Thank you for your trust, Your Majesty. However, time is really limited, and I can't always serve Your Majesty. This time, I came because the war has reached the most critical moment. I have at most 5 days before I have to leave this world, Bai Xiaowen said. So short? Nicholas IV shook his head and sighed. It's enough, Your Majesty. Bai Xiaowen appeared to have a card up his sleeve. At this time, he had to give Nicholas IV confidence. Actually, the ones who are really stirring up the storm are speculators from another world like me. Unfortunately, they are on the opposite side of Your Majesty. We only need to expel or even kill this group of speculators, and Your Majesty's rule will be stabilized. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, Your Majesty, I don't know if you've seen the picture scroll that I asked Cecilia to pass to you. I've seen it. Nicholas IV sighed. If you hadn't reminded me, I really wouldn't have believed that the 2 senior officers I've always trusted have been replaced by the enemy. It's not Your Majesty's fault. The speculators from another world cut into this world without anyone noticing. We can only analyze from their behavior. Those who have a great contrast from their previous behavior and are like 2 different people may have been replaced by speculators from another world. For example, you? Dior Kale Bloom? Nicholas IV teased with a smile. Ha! Bai Xiaowen felt that the atmosphere had relaxed a little and laughed out loud. Your Majesty, let's not discuss the problem of how to identify the speculators for now. Anyway, you've already identified the senior officers who were replaced with Cecilia. The next thing to consider is how to use the enemy's moles to complete the strategic deception and achieve our goal. Chapter 1067. Bosui's castle changed drastically. 2 days ago. In the Imperial Army headquarters, a high-level military meeting. Your Majesty, the rebels are 1.5 days away from Bosui's castle. This castle was built by Duke Bosui over many years. The walls are high and thick, and it will take a lot of effort to take it down. We think we should discuss the specific tactics, a leader-level Imperial general said. Nicholas IV shook his head slightly. Before we decide to attack, there is one more important thing to do. After a pause, Nicholas said, the monsters that came out of the ground are currently entrenched in a dark corner of the West San province. They are waiting for us to launch a sneak attack after the battle with the West San rebels. Although with the strength of the Imperial Army, we are not afraid of those pointy-eared monsters in a head-on battle. If they launch a sneak attack when our formation is not in order, the consequences will be unpredictable. The high-ranking officers in the tent looked at each other and whispered among themselves. Basically, everyone agreed with the Emperor's judgment. We need to send out a search team, 1 north and 1 south, to search for the drows and ensure that these monsters have no chance to launch a sneak attack on us. Nicholas led the conversation further. So, which 2 of you are willing to carry out this mission? The high-ranking officers lowered their heads and said nothing. The rumors of the underground monsters had always been cruel and ruthless. If the search team really encountered the drows, the consequences could be imagined. They would be lucky to be able to run back, let alone face the enemy. The biggest possibility was that they would be captured and killed by the Drows. Seeing the officers shirking their duties, Nicholas Ivy's face turned cold. Why, no one is willing to do this kind of slightly dangerous mission. Are you still Imperial Army men? Where did your sense of honor go? Seeing that no one in the tent volunteered, Nicholas IV sighed. Forget it. It is indeed not good for you to carry out this kind of mission that may lead to death. Then we will postpone the attack plan. Build a camp outside Bosui's castle and prepare for a long-term battle. Suddenly, a tall and thin Imperial Army officer stood up and said, I, Sirik Barnett, am willing to share your Majesty's burden. Please allow me to lead an army to patrol the south. Another strong officer was not to be outdone. I am also willing to fight for your Majesty and take on the heavy responsibility of searching the north. All right. Nicholas IV heaved a sigh of relief. The two generals are truly role models for the Empire. Remember, once you find the location of the Drow army, immediately report to me through the magic communication rune and report the specific location. As he spoke, Nicholas IV asked the guards to hand over 2 magical communication runes that could not be brought out of the Kane dimension to the 2 officers who volunteered. Prepare the army. Tomorrow morning, we will march toward Bosui City. Nicholas IV, who had resolved his worries, gave the order in high spirits. The upheaval in Vesuvius Castle, 1 day ago. The 2 Imperial Army officers who volunteered to take on the search mission secretly met each other before they set off. I've already sent the necessary information to team leader Andre through the magic raven, the muscular officer said. The tall and thin officer named Sirik Barnett looked around and reprimanded in a low voice, Nazem, why didn't you follow the main force of the Imperial Army? The team leader needs informants to ensure that he understands the Imperial Army's movements. Nazem sneered, Sirik, why didn't you follow the main force, but took the initiative to lead the search team? Sirik frowned and said, the situation is obvious. No one in the Imperial Army is willing to take on this dangerous task. If Nicholas IV postpones the attack in camp, the strategic plan formulated by the team leader will be obstructed. There are not many days left for the 3rd main mission. We must stabilize the Emperor's determination to attack the city. After a pause, Sirik continued, besides, if I didn't take on the search mission and other spiritual realm characters led the search, in case they really found out that the Drow army is stationed in the Valley of Ilia in the south, the siege plan will inevitably be interrupted. There are not many days left for the 3rd main mission. We must stabilize the Emperor's determination to attack the city. Yes, so someone needs to stand up in both directions, one north and one south, Nazem said lazily. Sirik snorted, after I stand up, the Emperor can use this as an excuse to appoint another person to search in the north. We all know that the Drow army is in the south. That person's search will not yield any results. So, there is no need for you to stand up at all. Nazem, with your IQ, I don't believe you did bad things out of good intentions. You did it on purpose. Nazem sneered, come on, Sirik. You think you're the only smart one? What do you mean? You know what I mean. Nazem shook his thick neck, don't think I'm uncultured. Boss's Raven message has already said that there are awakened ones in the Imperial camp who do not belong to Class 129. They have already carried out an investigation in the Central Province. The 2 idiots, Jet and Morgan, were driven out of the Kane Plain and missed the opportunity to unify. Nazem continued, the main force of the Imperial Army will encounter other awakened ones sooner or later and be recognized. In other words, there is a danger of being exposed at any time. So what if I'm lucky enough not to be exposed? When the attack on Vesuvius Castle broke out, I had to be driven out of Kane Plain. Otherwise, I would become a plague undead and lose the qualification to be an awakened. You can find a chance to escape before the siege, Sirik said. It's not easy to get a parachute on a plane with a bomb. Instead of jumping out immediately, you have to wait until the plane is about to explode for fun? Nazem shrugged, sorry, I don't have the hobby of shooting Hollywood blockbusters. Nazem spread out his hands, in short. Nicholas IV has already ordered the army to attack the city. As the emperor, he can't change his orders. Team leader's plan will definitely succeed. Just wait and see. I'm not interested in arguing with you anymore. Cyric gritted his teeth, but it was to no avail. The two awakened ones who cut in as officers of the Imperial Army were actually members of the intelligence team of Class 129 of the Divine Court training camp. They each led dozens of cavalry and parted ways, one north and one south. Time turned back to the present. The mountains in the north. Looking at the green smoke rising from Vesuvius Castle in the distance, awakened Nazem pressed his finger to his left chest. Amen. Walking down the mountain, Nazem was in a good mood. Cyric, that fox, did he really think I was a muscle-bound, simple-minded idiot? Escaping in advance is really a good plan. Sir Nazem, cavalry has appeared in the southern valley, an Imperial Army soldier reported. Are they our men or the Paracel Sand rebels? Nazem still faithfully played the role of a senior Imperial officer. They are our allies. Allies? Why would they appear at this time? Nazem was secretly surprised, but due to etiquette, he still led his men to greet them. General Adolphus, why are you here? Nazem was shocked when he saw the general at the front of the cavalry. Adolphus was a loyal follower of the emperor and was a viscount. Viscount Adolphus didn't give Nazem any face. The soldiers under his command surrounded Nazem from both sides. His Majesty ordered that Nazem Gunter betrayed the country and defected to the enemy. The evidence is conclusive. He ordered me to lead the army to eliminate the traitor. There is no need to capture him, just execute him on the spot. The search team soldiers are all innocent, but they are not allowed to obstruct the law enforcement. Move! Chapter 1068. Calculating the time, the two Divine Court Awakeners who infiltrated the camp as senior officers of the Empire, who are also spies of the Empire, should have been driven out by now, Bai Xiaowen said. That's for sure. Every spy of the Empire is led by a commander-level general, with dozens of elite cavalrymen and hundreds of ordinary soldiers, as well as mages and priests who are good at controlling skills, Li Shi said quickly. Even I can't escape. I can only use the town portal scroll. Li Shi, who had the invincible/awakening skill, had the best escape ability, but she was not confident that she could escape from such an encirclement. As for the Divine Court Awakeners, Bai Xiaowen did not think that he could kill them directly. It was very likely that the other party had a town portal scroll. At most, he could force them to leave. For Bai Xiaowen, the effect of asking them to leave was the same as killing them, but the energy and the possible price were completely different. Some people might ask, were the generals under Nicholas all cowards? Why did they not take the initiative to accept the search mission? The reason was simple. That military meeting itself was a scam aimed at the spies. After knowing the identity of the spies, Cecilia secretly identified them. The other senior officers of the Empire who attended the meeting had received a secret order from Nicholas not to take the initiative to participate in the battle. The purpose was to bait the two spies. As for why they did not directly identify the spies after knowing the identity of the spies, why did they have to spend energy to stage this scam? The reason was the strategic deception mentioned by Bai Xiaowen. They used the two spies to spread the information that the Empire wanted to convey. If they directly identified the two spies and received the news that they had been expelled, the Divine Court training camp would inevitably be more vigilant. The original plan might have unnecessary changes. Now that the Plague of the Dead had broken out in Bosaway Castle and all the plans were going smoothly, there was no need to keep the two spies. Therefore, Adolphus and the other two generals took action at this time. In front of the entrance of the Bosaway gold mine. Looking at the scattered Shisha rebels who were slaughtered like chickens and dogs by the Imperial Army, Andrei's face was very ugly. His eyes were full of self-blame when he looked at Ogiast. I should have known. I underestimated the skill level of the new chess player. He actually saw through our overall plan and made a counterattack at the key point of the plan. What happened? The main force of the Imperial Army should have been in Vesuvius Castle, but they were all wiped out by the undead plague. Why are they here? Ogiest said with a frown. He had already made a round in the battle formation, and his body was covered in the blood of his enemies. Faced with the main force of the Imperial Army's tight formation, even someone as strong as Ogiest did not dare to go too deep. Seeing that Ogiest still didn't understand the situation, Andre sighed and explained, "Sir Monitor, the situation is very clear. The Imperial Army that entered the city was just a cover, an abandoned piece thrown out by that chess player. The opponent's real goal was this place from the very beginning. How did they see through our plan? Even if they had seen through our plan, how could they have guessed that we were hiding in the gold mine tunnel? Could it be that there's a traitor?" Ogiest said in a low voice. Andre shook his head and said, "Before we set off, we signed a spiritual world contract. All the students can't divulge any information, so there's no possibility of a traitor. I really can't figure out how the other party did it. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Sir Monitor." Andre felt a deep sense of defeat. Andre was not a weak tactician. To him, it was not unacceptable for his strategy to be seen through by the opponent's intelligence. However, it was very difficult for him to accept that he had been defeated without knowing how or where the problem was. Could it be that the opponent's skill level had really exceeded his imagination? Andre lowered his head and sank into endless regret. Suddenly, a large and powerful hand pressed down on his shoulder. Andre raised his head abruptly and saw Ogiest's relaxed smiling face. "It's not over yet, Andre. This game has just begun." Ogiest put away the golden spear in his hand and pulled out a long spear that flickered with a cold black light. He suddenly said in a stern voice, "All troops, follow me to break out of the encirclement. Charge!" As Ogiest's long spear pointed, the ground under the feet of the Imperial Army in a large area in front of them cracked open. Streaks of dark red magma-like energy surged and rose. All the Imperial Army in this area suffered from periodic burning damage. Their armor and magic resistance dropped by 20% to 50%. Chaos Domain. It seemed that the drop in both magic resistance and magic resistance was not big, but considering the terrifying range of the Chaos Domain, the power of this skill was absolutely tyrannical. Ogiest clamped his legs tightly on the horse's abdomen and rode out first. Behind him, the cavalrymen from Bosue's territory were also affected. They all shouted and charged, forming a sharp arrow formation. A general of the Imperial Army immediately led his troops to intercept them. "Charge, charge! I'm the embodiment of death." Behind Ogiest, two illusory demonic wings suddenly spread open. He aimed his left hand at the general of the Imperial Army and clenched it. A large hand condensed from dark energy formed under the hooves of the warhorse that the general was riding. Then, following Ogiest's movements, it suddenly clenched. Both the general and the horse were held in the palm of his hand, entering a state of confinement. Ogiest's horse was extremely fast. The long spear that emitted a cold black light suddenly pierced through the chest of the Imperial Army's general. Instant kill! The corpse of the Imperial Army's general was lifted up by Ogiest's black spear and then fell heavily to the ground. Ogiest reined in his horse and laughed loudly. "Andre, your wisdom and my bravery are an invincible combination. Cheer up, as long as the two of us work together, we will never be defeated." The morale of the Imperial Army fell in an instant, but Bosue's private army was loud and their morale was greatly boosted. "Sir Squad Leader." Andre raised his head with complicated emotions. His wisdom was suppressed by the enemy, so the squad leader had to stand up and use his bravery to clean up the situation for him. This was absolutely humiliating for Andre. However, this feeling of being trusted and encouraged was very heartwarming. Ha ha ha. Only beauties and companions can never be let down. Charge! Ogiest was the first to charge into the formation of the Imperial Army. Every strike of the cold black spear took away the life of an enemy. There was no miss. Support team, buff the entire army. Suppression team, cover. Assault team, follow the squad leader in charge. Andre, who had regained his spirits, also began to issue commands. Camille, who was wrapped in a cloak, pulled out her 2 guns and led more than 10 team members to start suppressing the enemy with firepower. Dense bullets and arrows poured out, paving the way for Ogiest's charge. Chapter 1069. The leader of the support team, Alberta, who was dressed in a golden red striped robe, waved his staff. Light gathered in the sky, and beams of white light sprinkled down. Every soldier of Bossuet's private army felt their bodies lighten, as if there was an endless stream of energy gushing out from the depths of their bodies. Bai Xiaowen, who was hiding behind the flag of the Imperial Army, silently used his insight to spy on the enemy awakened ones. The Divine Court training camp really has a clear division of labor. From the looks of it, there are a total of 3 groups. The suppressive group is responsible for suppressing fire, the healing group is responsible for assisting in healing, and from the orders given by the awakened called Andre, there should also be an assault group that is responsible for charging in the front. Bai Xiaowen stroked his chin and said, looking at the conversation between Ogiest and Andre, the latter should be the team's think tank. In that case, it was very likely that Andre had led another independent team that was responsible for intelligence gathering and strategizing. In other words, there are 4 groups in total. Every group has a team leader, right? They are all powerful heroes. Including the class monitor, Ogiest, there are a total of 5 heroes. Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. No. I saw another archer hero in the suppression group apart from Camille. That is to say, there are heroes in the group as well. A conservative estimate is that there will be no less than 10 hero classes in this training camp. I saw an acquaintance. Qiao Rui suddenly said, look, the one behind Ogiest. Li Shi looked over and saw a muscular figure brandishing a 2-handed greatsword as he charged into the battlefield. His body seemed to be surrounded by the aura of an ocean current. Every once in a while, he would slash and deal AoE magic damage to all the enemies around him. Ouyang Heng. Li Shi's eyes widened. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, I've already noticed. Judging from his position, he should be the leader of the assault team. It seems that our admiral is doing well in the Divine Court training camp. Qiao Rui heaved a sigh of relief. I knew he would be there. Back then, eldest aunt told me that Ouyang Heng had joined the Divine Court training camp and had a bright future ahead of him. So when I heard that he was in the Divine Court, I was mentally prepared. I've heard from you that Ouyang Heng has caused quite a bit of trouble in the capital. The unification operation organized by the Divine Court training camp was a good opportunity for him to get rid of trouble. As long as he can witness the unification and obtain the template of an elite evolver or above, many people will look at him differently, Bai Xiaowen said. The Ouyang family was really powerful. They could even help Ouyang Heng get a team leader position in the Divine Court training camp. From the organizational structure of the training camp, the team leader was second only to the squad leader. The White Phoenix team did not know of the existence of the vice squad leader, and should be in the top 5 in the training camp. Correspondingly, in the process of unification, the higher the status of the students, the more opportunities they had to fight for war contributions. If Ouyang Heng could complete the unification with the team and get the top 5 war contributions, he should be able to become a hero evolver. When the Black Tide plane was unified, Qiao Rui and Cecilia seemed to have contributed a lot to the war. But in the end, they did not get the book of a hero evolver. In fact, it was not surprising. Most of their war contributions were counted in the scavenger mission, and the scavenger mission was not evaluated. In fact, if Li Shi had not participated in the Dusty Temple main mission, she would not have been able to get the book of a hero evolver. Therefore, under normal circumstances, as long as the level of the scavenger mission was not too high, the war contributions generated from the unification would be very rich, and it was normal for a few hero evolvers to appear. Xiaowen, should we make a move? The awakened named Ogiest is so powerful. He is about to succeed. Li Shi was a little anxious. Bai Xiaowen smiled and shook his head. The effort is not proportional to the benefit. There is no need to spend energy on this kind of battle that has no benefits. If the Awakened from the Divine Court want to leave, let them go. Tell Nicholas IV to focus on the rebels of Shisha, which is the indigenous people. If we can't let the rebels of Shisha escape, it will be a victory. Qiao Rui quickly understood. The Awakened from the Divine Court should have items like town return scrolls. Even if we take action, we can't make them stay. And even if we can kill a few of them, as the initiator of the attack, we won't get any benefits. Instead, we will expose our identity and attract their hatred. Well, the main thing is that there is no benefit. It is not worth making enemies for nothing. Bai Xiaowen said, so what if we let these Awakened from the Divine Court go? As long as the rebels of Shisha are all eliminated, the Awakened ones will be like water without a source. As long as the Imperial Army survives this period of being attacked from two sides, they will be able to catch their breath. At that time, the Awakened from the Divine Court will not be able to cause any trouble. Under Bai Xiaowen's suggestion, the Imperial Army quickly changed their strategy. They no longer chased after Ogiast and the other Awakened from the Divine Court. Instead, they focused on attacking the rebels of Shisha who tried to escape in the form of long-range attacks. Although the rebels of Shisha were strengthened by the Awakened from the Divine Court, their combat power was still much weaker than that of the regular army. Every 100 meters, a group of rebel corpses would fall. Ogiast did not dare to continue fighting. He led the Awakened from the Divine Court to break out of the encirclement and leave. Only a few Awakened from the Divine Court who were not strong enough could not keep up with them. They were forced to hand over their town return scrolls and disappeared into light. For Ogiast, these guys who were not strong enough had come in through connections, so he didn't feel bad about driving them out. The Imperial Army launched the final annihilation of the remaining rebels of Shisha. Seeing that there was no hope of escaping, a large number of rebels threw down their weapons and knelt down to surrender. In this battle, the Imperial Army had won a complete victory. They had basically wiped out the rebels of Shisha and captured the fake emperor, the original uncle of the emperor, Colomans. When the Divine Court broke out of the encirclement, they had no choice but to give up Colomans. Colomans was too weak. He was like a mascot and could not keep up with the Awakened from the Divine Court. If Ogiast took Colomans away by force, he would definitely become the first target of the Imperial Army. Perhaps even Ogiast would be left behind. Therefore, he had to cut his losses. Andre had a glimmer of hope. He had hidden Colomans in a secret crevice in the gold mine. He wanted to wait for the Imperial Army to leave before quietly coming over to rescue him. However, such petty tricks were of no use at all. Bai Xiaowen scanned the area with his mind, and it didn't take long for him to find Colomans. Nicholas IV was overjoyed. He immediately wanted to read out Colomans' crimes and even wanted to behead him on the spot. It was no wonder. After all, Nicholas had lost one of his favorite generals, Count Denton. He was full of anger. It was already a wise king to listen to Bai Xiaowen's advice and give up on intercepting the murderer Ogiast. The main reason was that he did not want the Imperial Army to suffer too many losses. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.